In this world, we are taught to fear pain, to avoid suffering, to chase comfort as if it is the only home we belong to. But what if I told you that pain is not your enemy, that the very moments that break you are often the same moments that awaken something powerful within you? Buddhism doesn't see pain as a punishment, it sees it as a path, a teacher, a doorway. Sometimes life closes every door, removes every comfort and leaves you standing in a silence so loud it echoes inside your soul. And in that silence, something sacred begins. The self you thought you were begins to dissolve, and beneath it, a deeper self, untouched by the world, begins to stir. So, if you are going through pain right now, if your heart is heavy and your soul tired, know this: you are not being buried. You are being planted because something better is trying to grow. And the soil of your suffering may just be the birthplace of your most beautiful transformation. Let us walk together through powerful lessons from Buddhist wisdom that show why life's deepest hurt may be the seed of your highest awakening. 1. The flower only blooms after it breaks the seed. Every beautiful flower you see, whether it's a vibrant lotus rising from the mud or a delicate bloom swaying in the wind, did not begin its journey in light, beauty, or ease. It began in total darkness, buried beneath the soil, in a place no one could see, in conditions that were cold, silent, and seemingly lifeless. The seed, small and fragile, rests under layers of earth where no sunshine reaches, no fresh air flows, and no human eye can observe its struggle. And yet, deep within that seed, something begins to stir, a quiet force, a silent urge to grow, to become, to rise. But before the seed can ever reach the surface, before it can feel the warmth of the sun or display its colors to the world, it must go through something that looks like destruction. It must crack open. Its outer shell, the very thing that once protected it, must break. The structure that kept it whole must fall apart. Without that breaking, the life inside it will never be set free. The seed cannot bloom unless it lets go of what it used to be. And in this, we find a reflection of ourselves. As human beings, our souls often begin their transformation not in moments of joy or comfort, but in moments of deep pain and uncertainty. When your world feels like it's collapsing, when relationships fall apart, when your dreams dissolve, when everything you've depended on begins to slip through your fingers, that is when something sacred begins. Just like the seed, you are not being destroyed. You are being broken open so that something higher, something more authentic, can come alive. Buddhism teaches that suffering is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your awakening. Pain, confusion, and emotional storms are not curses. They are catalysts. They shake you, not to weaken you, but to stir the strength that has been lying dormant inside you. These trials are not random punishments. They are sacred opportunities. Opportunities to shed the false layers you've built around your soul, layers of ego, fear, expectation, and attachment. When those layers crack, your true self, the part of you that is wise, compassionate, and resilient, finally has room to breathe. So, when you are in the middle of your breaking, when your life feels unfamiliar and your heart feels fragile, remind yourself, this is not the end. This is not failure. This is the very beginning of something extraordinary. You are becoming the person you were always meant to be. You are stepping into a version of yourself that cannot be shaped by ease alone. It must be sculpted by challenge. And like the flower that eventually rises from the dirt to greet the sun, you too will rise, not in spite of your pain, but because of it. So do not fear the breaking. Do not resist it. Embrace it. Trust it. Because what feels like falling apart is often life rearranging you in ways that align you with your highest purpose. In the silence of your suffering, in the soil of your sorrow, something beautiful is growing, and that something is you. 2. Pain is the fire that burns away the false self. Imagine a sculptor standing before a massive block of stone. At first glance, the stone looks complete, whole, untouched, solid. But the sculptor doesn't see the stone as it is. He sees the figure hidden inside. and to bring that figure into the light, he must begin the process of carving. With each strike of the chisel, a piece of the stone falls away. Every strike seems harsh, violent, and destructive, but in truth, every blow is a precise act of creation. Every piece removed is something that never belonged. The figure hidden within the stone was always there. The sculptor simply had to remove the excess to reveal it. In much the same way, the pain you face in life acts as a sculptor of the soul. When suffering arrives, it does not come to ruin you. It comes to reshape you, to chip away everything that is not truly you. Your ego, your attachments, your fear, your pride, these are the excess layers that build up around the essence of who you are. Life, in its mysterious wisdom, uses pain to carve them away, not to harm you, but to reveal you. Buddhist wisdom teaches that we often live behind a false self, a version of ourselves built from expectations, fears, social roles, and stories we've told ourselves since childhood. This false self clings to the idea of control, to identity, to what we think we need to be happy. But as long as we are trapped in this illusion, we cannot experience true liberation. The purpose of suffering is not to punish you for being human. It is to awaken you to the truth that you are far more than the identity you've constructed. Pain feels like fire, and fire by nature consumes. But in Buddhism, fire is also a purifier. It burns away what is impure, what is unnecessary, what is heavy. It leaves behind only what is essential. When you walk through the fire of pain, you lose pieces of yourself, not the real you, but the false attachments you've clung to for far too long. You begin to see that you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be accepted by everyone. You don't need to control everything. And in that moment of surrender, something profound happens. You return to your core. You become softer, not weaker, but more open. You begin to see the world differently. You stop reacting with anger and start responding with compassion. You stop needing constant validation and begin to feel contentment from within. The person who emerges from pain is not the same person who entered it. You are humbled, but also expanded. You are scarred, but also sacred. You've lost pieces of your old self, but in losing them, you've gained truth. It is not easy to walk through this fire. At times, it will feel unfair. You may ask, why me? You may cry for the pain to stop. And that's okay. Buddhism never asks you to pretend you're not hurting. It only asks you to stay awake inside the pain, to observe it, to breathe through it, and to trust that it is leading you somewhere your comfort zone never could. So if life has thrown you into a fire, if everything around you seems to be falling apart, pause for a moment. Look inward. Ask yourself, what is this trying to remove? What illusion is being burned away? What truth is being revealed? Sometimes the fire doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it saves you, because only when you've been stripped of what is false can you finally stand in what is real. And what is real cannot be burned. It cannot be shaken. It cannot be taken away. It is the part of you that has always been whole. 3. Growth feels like destruction in the beginning. We often imagine growth as something beautiful and peaceful, like a tree slowly stretching toward the sky, kissed by the sun and cradled by the breeze. We like to believe that personal transformation happens gently through meditation, reflection, or quiet moments of realization. But in truth, real growth, deep, soul-level transformation, almost never arrives like a soft whisper. It arrives like a storm. And when it does, it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't knock politely. It tears through everything you thought was secure. It shakes the very foundation you were standing on. It removes the things you once clung to for comfort, familiarity, and identity. It leaves you questioning everything, your choices, your beliefs, your place in this world. And in those moments, growth doesn't feel graceful. It feels like destruction. But Buddhism reminds us that destruction is not always a sign of failure. It can also be a sign of renewal. Just as a forest fire, though devastating, clears space for new life to emerge, the breakdowns in our lives clear the path for breakthroughs. When life feels unbearable, when things fall apart without warning, when you are left staring at the ashes of what used to be, you are not being punished. You are being reshaped. You see, the process of awakening often begins with discomfort. We rarely grow when things are easy. Comfort keeps us asleep, wrapped in patterns, routines, and identities that do not challenge us to evolve. It is suffering that stirs us awake. It is pain that calls us to look deeper, to let go of what no longer serves, to question the roles we've been playing, and to begin walking the path of truth, even if it means walking alone. Growth doesn't always look like rising. Sometimes it looks like crumbling. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a room with your heart in pieces, not knowing who you are anymore. Sometimes it means losing the people who once meant the most to you, only to discover that you were clinging to an illusion. Sometimes it means watching your dreams collapse, only to be redirected to a purpose that's far greater than anything you had planned. It's easy to mistake this stage as the end of something, and in a way it is. But endings are sacred in Buddhism. They are not to be feared but honored, because in the philosophy of impermanence, nothing is ever truly lost. Everything is simply changing form. What feels like destruction may actually be the soil being turned, the old roots being pulled to make room for something stronger to grow. The teachings of the Buddha remind us that all conditioned things are temporary. Your emotions, your relationships, your attachments, your pain, none of them will last forever. And when things begin to fall apart, it may not be life being cruel. It may be life aligning you with something deeper, something more real, something that cannot be taken away. So if your world feels like it's collapsing, if your identity is dissolving, if you no longer recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror, pause. Don't run. Don't panic. Don't try to rebuild something that was never meant to last. Instead, allow yourself to sit in the space between what was and what's becoming. This is the cocoon stage, the stage where the caterpillar melts into nothingness before becoming the butterfly. It is terrifying to be in this in-between, to not know what's next, to feel like you've lost everything. But in Buddhism, this stage is sacred. It's where your ego dies and your essence begins to speak. It's where your mind surrenders and your soul begins to lead. And though it hurts, it's also honest, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly where transformation begins. Growth will not always be visible to others. It may not make sense to your family. It may not be applauded by your friends. It might look from the outside like you're falling apart, but only you will know what's really happening. You are being stripped bare so that your truest self can be revealed. You are being emptied so that you can be filled with something real. So when life feels like a storm has ripped through everything you once held sacred, know this: you are not broken. You are being rebuilt. Not according to your old blueprints, but according to your soul's deepest design. The chaos you feel now is not the end. It is the earthquake that frees you from the cage you were never meant to live in. Trust the process, even when it doesn't make sense. Especially when it doesn't make sense, because the life that is trying to emerge from within you is far more beautiful, far more powerful, and far more aligned than anything you've ever known before. And sometimes, the only way to reach that life is to allow the old one to fall away. 4. The wound is where awareness enters. There are moments in life when pain becomes so intense that it cuts through every distraction, every illusion, every layer of protection we've built around ourselves. In those moments, the pain doesn't just visit, it settles deep into the heart. It lingers, it pulsates, it forces you to stop, to listen, to see. And it is in those very moments, as difficult and raw as they are, that awareness quietly begins to awaken. Buddhist teachings remind us that suffering is not simply a punishment for past actions or a burden to bear. It is a teacher, a mirror that reflects what we have ignored, denied, or pushed aside for too long. It points us inward, toward the places that need healing, the thoughts that need unlearning, and the stories that no longer serve us. But this awakening often begins at the site of the wound. The wound becomes the entry point, not the obstacle, to deeper presence, greater truth, and inner transformation. Think of the times when your heart was broken, when someone left, when you lost something you thought you could never live without, when you were betrayed, abandoned, rejected, or misunderstood. Those moments may have brought you to your knees, but they also brought you face to face with your own soul. They stripped away the noise of daily life. They silenced the distractions. They revealed what was hidden beneath the surface. In that silence, painful as it was, you began to feel something deeper. You began to notice your breath. You began to observe your thoughts. You started to hear your own voice, the one you'd been too busy, too afraid, or too distracted to listen to before. Pain, for all its difficulty, has the power to strip away illusion and bring us directly into the present moment. And it is only in the present moment that true awareness lives. Buddhism teaches the value of mindfulness, not as a trendy practice, but as a way of truly living. Mindfulness is not about forcing happiness or avoiding pain. It is about sitting with what is, exactly as it is, without judgment. And often it is the wound that first calls us into mindfulness. Because when you're hurting, you can no longer afford to live on autopilot. You must pay attention to your breath, to your body, to your heart. You become aware of the sensations you once ignored, the tightness in your chest, the tears behind your eyes, the thoughts spinning in your mind. And slowly, this awareness becomes a kind of medicine. It doesn't take the pain away immediately, but it changes your relationship with the pain. Instead of fighting it, you observe it. Instead of fearing it, you explore it. Instead of numbing it, you feel it fully. And in doing so, you begin to heal. There's a powerful Zen saying, "The wound is where the light enters." And this is not just poetic, it's profoundly true. When your heart breaks, it opens. And when it opens, the light of awareness pours in. You begin to ask questions you never asked before. Who am I beneath my roles and titles? What do I truly want? What parts of me have I abandoned in order to be loved or accepted? What am I here to learn, to unlearn, to become? These are not small questions, they are sacred ones, and they don't arise in comfort. They arise in crisis. They surface in the wake of pain. Pain becomes the doorway, the path, the teacher. You may look back and realize that the greatest lessons of your life didn't come from your happiest moments. They came from the moments that tore you open, the moments that humbled you, the moments that made you cry alone at night, wondering if you'd ever feel whole again. But it was precisely because you felt that pain that you learned how to be present, how to be compassionate, how to be still, how to see. The wound is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to honor. It shows that you have lived, that you have risked, that you have felt deeply. And now that very wound is becoming your portal to a higher level of consciousness. In Buddhist meditation, one is taught to observe suffering without clinging or pushing it away, to let it rise and fall like waves, to witness it without becoming it. This practice doesn't erase the wound, but it allows you to see the space around it, to realize that while pain may visit your life, it is not the totality of your being. You are more than the wound. You are the awareness that holds it. And from this awareness, compassion grows, not just for yourself, but for others. You begin to see that everyone is wounded in some way, that behind every smile might be a story of sorrow, that even those who hurt you may be carrying their own invisible pain. This awareness softens your heart. It makes you kinder. It makes you wiser. So the next time you feel broken, the next time your chest aches with emotion, the next time the weight of grief or disappointment feels unbearable, pause. Don't rush to escape it. Don't cover it with noise. Just sit with it. Let the pain speak. Let the tears fall. Let the silence expand. Because in that sacred stillness, something ancient awakens. A light begins to shine. not in spite of the wound, but because of it. This is the gift hidden inside your suffering: deeper awareness, a clearer vision, a more open heart. And that, dear soul, is the beginning of true healing. 4. The wound is where awareness enters. There comes a moment in life when all the noise begins to fade, not because the world has grown silent, but because something inside you has broken open. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, aching unraveling. The kind of break that doesn't scream, but whispers in 1,000 invisible ways. You walk through your days wearing the same clothes, saying the same words, doing what you've always done, but something feels different. A crack has appeared, not outside, but deep within you. It begins with something simple, a comment that cuts deeper than it should, a goodbye you weren't expecting, a dream that quietly slips away. Then, without warning, you're no longer able to pretend that you're fine. You sit in silence, your chest tight, your breath shallow, your thoughts loud and wild. You try to keep moving forward, to function, to perform, but the pain keeps pulling you inward. And it is here, in this very place, that the seed of awareness begins to awaken. Buddhist philosophy teaches that suffering is not an interruption to life's path, it is the path. We are not meant to avoid pain, but to meet it, to face it, to understand it. Because when something within us breaks, it breaks for a reason, and that reason is rarely to destroy, it is to reveal. The wound becomes an invitation, a sacred call to return, not to the world, not to others, but to yourself, to your breath, to your body, to the inner landscape you've neglected for too long. Most of us live much of our lives on the surface. We're caught in habits, in distractions, in constant movement. We fill our time with responsibilities, entertainment, and endless thoughts, not because we're fulfilled, but because we're avoiding the deeper stillness inside, the stillness that might reveal something uncomfortable, something unresolved, something real. But pain doesn't let you stay on the surface. It drags you down. It forces you to stop, to sit, to breathe, to listen. And though it feels merciless, it is, in truth, an act of mercy. It is life's way of saying, you cannot keep living like this. You must come home to yourself. You must see what you've refused to see. The wound becomes the opening. You may find yourself crying not just because something happened, but because something within you is finally being acknowledged. You cry for the parts of you that were silenced, abandoned, dismissed. You cry for the versions of yourself that kept showing up, smiling, pretending, holding it together. You cry because for the first time in a long time, you are truly with yourself, without the mask, without the armor. This is where awareness begins, not in enlightenment retreats or perfect meditation postures, but in the raw, unfiltered presence of your own suffering. Pain is not the opposite of peace. It is often the beginning of it, because it breaks through everything false, everything forced, everything performative, and reveals what's real. In this brokenness, the teachings of Buddhism guide us not to resist, but to remain present. To sit with the wound without judgment, to hold it gently, like a crying child who needs no fixing, only to be seen. We begin to notice our thoughts without becoming them. We notice the tightness in our chest, the heaviness in our body, the trembling of our voice. We bring awareness to every sensation, every feeling, every breath. And this awareness does something extraordinary. It softens us, it heals without force. It transforms without demand. There is a Zen proverb that says, "The crack is where the light enters." But the crack is not just physical, it is spiritual. It is emotional. It is the place in you that says, "I can't do this alone anymore." And in that honest surrender, you finally begin to receive the grace that was always waiting for you. Awareness floods in like sunlight through a broken window. You begin to see the patterns that kept you stuck, the fears that ruled your decisions, the stories you told yourself about what you deserved, and in seeing them clearly, you are no longer bound by them. The wound teaches you empathy, not just for others, but for yourself. You stop judging your pain as weakness. You stop calling yourself broken. You begin to understand that to feel deeply is not a flaw. It is a sacred capacity. It is what connects you to every other being who has ever suffered. It is what makes you human. And from this space of raw truth, compassion is born. You no longer look at others with harsh eyes. You see their silence as a form of protection. You see their distance not as rejection, but as someone managing their own pain. You begin to realize that everyone is carrying something, and that realization makes you kinder, softer, slower to judge, quicker to love. From the Buddhist perspective, the wound is not something to fix. It is something to understand, something to bow to, something to learn from. It becomes your teacher, your doorway, your altar. You begin to see that your wound doesn't make you less. It makes you more real, more present, more awake. When you sit in meditation, when you return to the breath, when you notice the thoughts passing like clouds, you realize that the pain is not permanent. It changes, it shifts, it rises and falls. And in the space between those waves you find something eternal, the observer, the awareness, the unchanging stillness beneath all the movement. And that stillness was always there, waiting, watching, whispering. You just needed the wound to hear it. So the next time you feel broken, the next time grief brings you to your knees, the next time life seems to collapse beneath you, pause. Don't rush to fix it. Don't drown it in noise. Sit with it. Let it speak. Let it weep. Let it breathe. Because beneath the ache there is awakening, and within the wound there is wisdom waiting to be found. 5. Letting go hurts because you're still holding on. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't scream, doesn't shout, and doesn't come from outside forces. It comes from within. It's the kind of pain that lingers in silence, the ache you feel when something is over, but a part of you refuses to accept it. When someone walks away, when a chapter closes, when a season ends, and you know, deep down, it's time to let go, but your heart still clings, and so you suffer. In Buddhism, one of the most profound truths is this: attachment is the root of suffering. Not because the things we love are bad, but because we confuse them with permanence. We hold on to them as if they will always stay, as if we can stop time, as if we can freeze life into moments of security and certainty. But life, by its very nature, flows. It changes. It moves like a river, never the same, never still, never yours to possess. And when you try to hold on to what is meant to pass, that grasp becomes the very source of your pain. Letting go is not a simple act of release. It is a process of unwinding everything you've wrapped your identity around. We don't just cling to people, we cling to roles, to ideas, to expectations. We hold tightly to what we believed our life was supposed to look like, to who we thought we'd become, to how we expected others to treat us. And when reality doesn't match our fantasy, we suffer, not because life betrayed us, but because our attachment would not allow us to flow with it. Think of a person gripping a rope. The rope begins to burn their hands. The tighter they hold on, the more pain they feel. The logical solution would be to let go, but the mind resists. It says, "What if I fall? What if I never find another rope? What if this is all I have?" And so we hold on, long after we've outgrown the situation, long after it's turned toxic, long after the rope has begun to bleed us. Why do we do this? Because to let go is to face the unknown, and the unknown terrifies us. Even if the current situation is painful, it is familiar, and we mistake familiarity for safety. The ego tells us that holding on gives us control, but in truth it only gives us tension, anxiety, and exhaustion. Control is an illusion. Life is not meant to be controlled. It's meant to be experienced. And sometimes that experience requires us to loosen our grip and surrender. Buddhist practice doesn't force us to detach harshly. It invites us to do so with mindfulness and compassion. It asks us to examine our attachments gently, to to ask, why am I holding on? What am I afraid will happen if I let this go? What part of me believes I need this to be whole? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to free you. Because behind every attachment is a belief that you are not enough without that thing, person, or identity. And as long as you believe that, you will always be afraid to let go. Letting go hurts, not because the act itself is violent, but because we have built meaning around what we're releasing. We've made it part of our story. We've told ourselves, without this, I am less. But the truth is, the things that fall away are not taking pieces of you. They are revealing what was never truly you to begin with. When a relationship ends, it may feel like a death, but what is dying is the image you had of the future, not your capacity to love. When you walk away from a job, it may feel like you're losing stability, but what's actually crumbling is the illusion that your worth was tied to your title. When a dream fades, it may feel like the end of purpose, but what's really happening is a redirection. Life is clearing space for something more aligned, more honest, more you. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is not a curse, it is a gift. It is what makes each moment precious. What makes love real is not that it lasts forever, but that it is deeply present while it lasts. What makes your breath sacred is that each one could be your last. And what makes life beautiful is that nothing in it can be possessed, only appreciated. So, what does it mean to let go? It means trusting the flow of life more than you trust your fear. It means loosening your grip on what is fading and turning your palms upward to receive what is coming. It means releasing the belief that your happiness depends on external things and returning again and again to the truth that peace is always within you, waiting to be uncovered, not added from the outside. Letting go is not forgetting. It is not pretending it didn't matter. It is not rushing to fill the space. It is honoring what was, grieving fully, and then choosing not to be chained by it. It is saying, this hurt me, this changed me, but it will not define me. It is trusting that your heart once cracked can hold light again, that your hands once emptied can be filled again, that your path once lost can be found again. There is a story in the Buddhist tradition of a man crossing a river. He builds a raft to get across. It takes time, effort, patience. When he reaches the other side, he feels grateful. But then he begins to carry the raft on his back, thinking, this helped me once, so I must never leave it behind. As he walks deeper into the forest, the raft becomes heavy. It slows him down. He stumbles beneath its weight. And eventually he realizes the raft served its purpose, but now it must be left behind. So too with the people, experiences, and identities that once served you. They were not mistakes. They were not wasted. They were rafts. And now it may be time to lay them down and continue walking, lighter, freer, more awake. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means giving yourself back. It means returning to the present moment, no longer trapped by the weight of yesterday. It means realizing that peace is not found in clinging, but in trusting. Trusting that what is meant for you will never miss you. Trusting that you are strong enough to walk forward, even with an aching heart. Trusting that by letting go, you are not losing. You are making space. Space for healing. Space for growth. Space for something new to bloom. And one day, you'll look back and see that what you let go of was never the end. It was the turning point. The quiet, painful, necessary beginning of a more truthful you. 6. Your breaking point is also your opening point. There are certain moments in life that bring you to your knees, moments that seem to tear through the very fabric of who you thought you were. You wake up one day and realize that what once held you together has unraveled. The relationships you leaned on are no longer there. The path you were walking has vanished. The strength you always counted on feels far away, and the silence inside you is louder than ever. You feel raw, exposed and uncertain, no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. This is what we often call the breaking point, and in our culture, breaking is often seen as a sign of weakness. We're taught to hold it together, to push through, to pretend we're fine, even when our hearts are screaming. We're told that falling apart means failure, that crying is losing, that uncertainty is shameful. But Buddhism invites us to look at this moment through a different lens. Because in the spiritual path, what feels like breaking is often the moment your ego begins to dissolve and your soul begins to rise. The breaking point is not the end, it is the threshold. It is the place where your old ways no longer work, where the coping mechanisms you once relied on begin to collapse, where your masks no longer fit. And in this uncomfortable, terrifying, and beautifully honest space, you are given a sacred invitation to stop pretending, to stop performing, and to start becoming real. From the Buddhist perspective, this breaking is not a punishment. It is the universe calling you inward. It is life peeling away the outer layers of identity so you can discover the depth of your own being. It is the moment when your attachment to the illusion of control is shattered, not to leave you empty, but to open you to a truth that is far more powerful than anything you could ever construct on your own. Think of a clay pot that has been cracked. In the eyes of the world, it may be seen as damaged, ruined, no longer useful. But in Japanese Zen tradition, there is an art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired using gold. The cracks are not hidden, they are honored. They are highlighted, filled with shimmering light, making the object more beautiful, more unique, and more valuable than before. The break is not the flaw, it is the feature. It tells a story of survival, of transformation, of resilience. So too with the human soul. Your breaking point, the moment you wept uncontrollably, the night you collapsed from exhaustion, the day you admitted you didn't know how to go on, is not something to hide. It is the golden crack in your story, the opening through which awareness, humility, compassion, and deep inner strength begin to enter. It's easy to be calm when life is calm. It's easy to speak of wisdom when nothing is testing you. But it is in the fire that your true nature is revealed. And sometimes it takes the fire to show you what cannot be burned, the stillness that remains when everything else has been stripped away. When you are at your lowest, when you feel like you've hit the bottom of your strength, you begin to see life differently. Your priorities shift. Your definitions of success, love, and happiness begin to evolve. You no longer chase the things that once fascinated you. You begin to crave peace more than praise, simplicity more than status, truth more than attention. This is the gift of breaking. It brings you back to what is real. Buddhist teachings speak of dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of life when we live from attachment and illusion. And often, our breaking point is the moment when dukkha becomes too loud to ignore, when the false walls we've built around our hearts come crashing down. And though it hurts, sometimes unbearably, it is in that very collapse that we finally begin to awaken. You start to notice your breath again. You sit in silence not out of preference but out of necessity. You begin to slow down. You start paying attention to your body, your thoughts, your surroundings. You realize that everything you were chasing was taking you further from yourself. And in this stillness you discover a truth that had been waiting for you all along. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be found. And you are not found in perfection. You are found in the broken places. This is why in Buddhism, the breaking point is sacred. It is where the journey inward begins. It is where the search for external answers ends and the inner knowing takes root. It is where you stop relying on outer validation and begin to trust your own inner wisdom. It is where you realize that what was falling apart was not you, but the illusion of you, the version of yourself that was shaped by fear, approval-seeking, expectations, and societal conditioning. You are not here to stay unbroken. You are here to open, and sometimes life must press against your edges, must stretch you, must shake you, so that the old shell can crack and something vast, silent, and unshakable can emerge from within. So if you find yourself breaking, if you are waking up with a heaviness you cannot name, if you're grieving the loss of what was familiar, if you feel lost in the space between who you were and who you're becoming, know that you are exactly where transformation begins. Don't rush to fix it. Don't rush to explain it. Don't try to make sense of the chaos right away. Sit with it. Breathe with it. Let the storm pass through you. And trust that what remains after the storm is not weakness. It is your core. It is the part of you that was always whole but had been covered by layers of noise, ambition, and distraction. Your breaking point is not the edge of your story. It is the place where your real story begins. The you that emerges from this will not be the same, but that's not a loss. It's an evolution. You will become more tender, more grounded, more present. You will know how to sit with others in their pain because you have sat with your own. You will carry less judgment, less arrogance, less need to prove. You will walk with a kind of softness that is not weakness, but deep wisdom, a quiet knowing that says, I have broken and I have risen. I am no longer afraid. And in time, you will look back at this moment, not with shame, but with reverence. Because it was in the breaking that the light finally got in, and it was in the breaking that you finally began to see who you really are. 7. What hurts you most is guiding you to your dharma. There is a deep and often hidden truth that reveals itself only after we have walked through fire. That the very thing which hurt us the most, the pain that brought us to our lowest point, may also be the pain that leads us to our life's highest purpose. It doesn't seem this way when we are in the midst of suffering, when we are crying into our pillow late at night, when we are sitting alone after loss, when we are staring into a future that suddenly feels empty. It feels cruel, random, and meaningless. But in the quiet wisdom of Buddhist philosophy, we are reminded again and again that nothing arises without cause, and that even the sharpest suffering can be the soil in which the seed of our dharma, our soul's path, begins to grow. Dharma is not just a job. It is not merely a duty or a role. It is the sacred thread that runs through your life, the deeper reason you are here, the truth that your soul came into this world to embody and express. But here is what many don't realize. Your dharma is not always found in joy. It is often hidden within the shadow. It reveals itself not when everything goes right, but when everything falls apart. In Buddhism, suffering is not an accident. It is part of the fabric of existence. Not because life is cruel, but because life is a great teacher, and suffering is one of its most powerful lessons. The pain you experienced, whether from betrayal, illness, heartbreak, failure, abandonment, or grief, is not meaningless. It is the carving. It is the shaping. It is the pressure that breaks the false identity so your deeper truth can come forward. So often people find their calling not in success, but in breakdown. A woman loses her job only to discover that she was never meant to work in that environment. She was meant to become a healer, a writer, a guide. A man loses someone he loves, and in the dark night of mourning, he discovers a strength, a tenderness, a spiritual sensitivity he never knew he had. A person falls into deep anxiety only to emerge with the understanding and compassion to help others out of that same darkness. These are not accidents. These are callings disguised as catastrophes. Buddhism reminds us of the law of cause and effect. What happens externally is connected to what is unfolding within. And often when the outer world seems to be crumbling, it's because your inner world is demanding to be heard. Your soul is ready to grow, but growth requires space. And to make space, sometimes life must first remove everything that is not aligned. This is painful, sometimes excruciating, but it is not punishment. It is realignment. It is life's way of preparing the soil of your being for the seed of Dharma to take root. You may not see the purpose yet. You may not know why you had to go through what you did, but one day you will. You'll look back and see that the most painful chapter of your life was also the most formative. You'll see how that pain shaped your perspective, opened your heart, and gave you the compassion to serve others in a way only you can. You'll see how your suffering made you soft where you used to be harsh, patient where you used to be reactive, wise where you used to be blind. The Buddhist path is not about escaping suffering, it is about transforming it. Pain is not something to run from, it is something to sit with, to breathe through, and to learn from. It is the fire that refines you, the silence that awakens you, the teacher that shows you the truth of impermanence, non-attachment, and the reality of change. When you accept that your dharma might be born through your most difficult experiences, everything begins to shift. You stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to show me?" You stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and begin to see yourself as a student of life. And every wound becomes a teacher, every scar becomes a map, every fall becomes a gateway to a deeper level of authenticity. Your dharma is not about perfection, it is about truth. It is about living in such a way that your inner life and outer actions are aligned, and that alignment often comes from contrast. You know what it means to speak truth because you've felt the pain of silence. You know how to hold someone in their grief because you've sat in your own. You know the value of kindness because you've been wounded by cruelty. And now those experiences are not just memories, they are fuel. They are the light you carry into the world. No one else has walked your exact path. No one else has felt exactly what you've felt. That makes you not just unique, but necessary. Because someone, somewhere, is going through something you've already survived. Someone is standing at the edge, wondering if they can go on. And you, yes, you, may be the quiet presence, the soft voice, the gentle reminder that helps them rise. This is the true beauty of dharma. It is never selfish. It always flows outward. The pain that cracked you open becomes the love that helps others heal. The loss that brought you to your knees becomes the wisdom that lifts someone else. Your story, once filled with sorrow, becomes a lantern for those still walking through the dark. So when life hurts you, don't assume it's the end. Sit with the pain. Listen to it. Ask it what it's here to teach you. Let it guide you inward, and slowly, gently, trust that the same force that allowed the wound will also guide the healing. Trust that there is a reason your heart still beats, your lungs still breathe, and your soul still stirs. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are being prepared. Your dharma is not found in spite of your suffering. It is born through it. It is shaped by it. And it is waiting patiently within you to be lived. 8. Pain awakens. The compassion you didn't know you had. We often think of pain as something to escape, to survive, to forget. When suffering arrives, our first instinct is usually to resist it, numb it, deny it, or run from it. We reach for distractions. We bury ourselves in busyness. We search for answers, for comfort, for something, anything that will make it stop. Because pain feels unfair, it feels heavy, suffocating, and lonely. And yet, buried inside that very suffering, there is a seed. A seed that, when allowed to open, gives birth to something far greater than mere survival. It gives birth to compassion, not the kind of compassion that is taught in books or preached in sermons, not the kind that is shared as a polite phrase or gesture, but a compassion that grows slowly, organically, from the soil of your own brokenness, a compassion that has nothing to prove, nothing to perform, a compassion that sees through the illusions, feels the invisible weight others carry, and whispers softly, "I understand." In Buddhist philosophy, pain is not just a consequence of life, it is an essential part of awakening. The first noble truth teaches that suffering, dukkha, is inevitable in this human existence. We suffer through loss, illness, disappointment, change, and eventually death. But this truth is not meant to make us feel helpless. It is meant to make us aware, to show us that within the shared experience of suffering lies the common ground of our humanity, and this is where compassion begins. Before you were hurt, you may have walked through the world focused on your goals, your plans, your identity. Perhaps you judged others easily. Perhaps you looked away from pain. Perhaps you didn't fully understand the struggles of the people around you, not because you didn't care, but because you hadn't yet been broken open. Your heart, though good, was still hidden behind layers of comfort and certainty. And then it happened. Life struck. Maybe it was the death of someone you loved. Maybe it was the betrayal of someone you trusted. Maybe it was your body failing you, or your mind turning against itself, or the quiet collapse of a dream you built your whole life around. Whatever it was, it brought you to your knees. It stripped you bare. It humbled you. And in that moment, when your voice trembled, when your eyes blurred with tears, when your heart cracked beneath the weight of something too large to carry, you changed. Something shifted. You began to see differently, to feel differently, to move through the world with a softness you didn't have before, not because the pain made you weak, but because it made you real. Suddenly, when you passed a stranger with tired eyes, you paused. When someone snapped at you in frustration, you no longer responded with anger. You wondered what they were going through. You saw the pain beneath their words. You recognized it because you'd seen it in yourself. You'd felt it in those quiet nights when no one knew you were hurting. You'd lived it when you smiled in public but were falling apart inside. This is the compassion that pain awakens. It's not loud, it doesn't boast, it simply lives inside you like a gentle presence. It guides you to listen more deeply, to speak more kindly, to hold space for others without trying to fix them. You begin to realize that the greatest gift you can offer is not advice or solutions, but presence, to sit with someone in their pain without flinching, to say with your silence, "You're not alone." In Buddhist practice, the cultivation of karuna, compassion, is not separate from the path to enlightenment. It is central to it, because as your awareness deepens, your heart softens. You stop dividing the world into me and them. You begin to understand that all beings, no matter their status, their beliefs, or their actions, are searching for the same thing: peace, safety, belonging. And you begin to see that their harmful behavior is often rooted not in evil, but in pain. And once you've seen pain up close, once you've held it in your own body, tasted it in your own mouth, you stop pretending that anyone is above or below you. You stop seeing people through the lens of superiority or inferiority. You see them simply as fellow travelers, each carrying their invisible burdens. And this vision changes everything. It changes how you speak. You become slower to criticize, quicker to understand. It changes how you love. You no longer demand perfection. You love people for who they are, not for who they were supposed to be. It changes how you forgive. You stop holding grudges like weapons. You realize that freeing others is also freeing yourself. And perhaps most importantly, it changes how you treat yourself. Because the first place your compassion must reach is inward. After suffering, many people turn against themselves. They blame themselves for what happened. They shame themselves for not healing faster. They compare their wounds to others and feel weak for still hurting. But true compassion says, there is no timeline for healing. There is no shame in pain. There is only space. Space to feel, to breathe, to mend, and to begin again. In Buddhist meditation, we practice metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness. We start with ourselves. We speak phrases like, "May I be safe, may I be well, may I be free from suffering." And slowly, we expand those wishes to others, our loved ones, our acquaintances, even those who have harmed us, not because they deserve it in a worldly sense, but because we deserve to live free of bitterness. Because the world needs more compassion, not more punishment. Because forgiveness is not saying, "What you did was okay." It's saying, "I will not carry this pain any longer. I choose peace." When you live from this space of awakened compassion, you move through the world differently. You begin to sense the silent stories behind people's eyes. You begin to listen not just to what someone says, but to what they mean. You begin to see that the loudest people are often the loneliest, that the angriest people are often the most afraid, that everyone in some way is fighting a battle they cannot name. And you don't need to fix them, you only need to see them, to witness their humanity without judgment, to hold space for their complexity, to offer the kind of compassion that says, "I've been there too." This is the kind of world suffering prepares you for, not a world of performance and perfection, but a world of tenderness, a world where we stop chasing approval and begin offering understanding. A world where we stop seeing people as broken and start seeing them as becoming. A world where every wound, every tear, every sleepless night is not wasted, but woven into something sacred. So if you are in pain right now, if life has stripped you bare, if you feel hollow, if your heart feels like a shattered mirror, please pause. Do not rush to rebuild. Do not harden yourself. Let the pain do its sacred work. Let it soften you. Let it humble you. Let it awaken a love within you that is bigger than your fear. You are not being punished. You are being opened. Because sometimes it is only through breaking that the heart learns how to stay open, and sometimes it is only through pain that the soul learns how to truly love. Not the love that clings, not the love that demands, but the love that sees, the love that stays, the love that says, "I understand." 9. The peace you seek isn't found, it's remembered. There is a longing that lives quietly in every human heart, a longing that's difficult to name, even harder to explain. It hums beneath our conversations, our relationships, our work, our ambition. It calls to us when we are alone, in the quiet hours of the night. It follows us even into success, even into love, even into comfort. It's the silent ache beneath our search for more, a deep yearning for peace. And so we spend much of our lives searching for the place where this ache will finally go quiet, searching for the person, the job, the circumstance, the belief, or the spiritual experience that will finally complete the puzzle we've been carrying inside. We move from one achievement to another, from one city to another, from one version of ourselves to another. Each time we whisper, maybe this is it. Maybe this is where I'll finally feel whole. But Buddhism, in its quiet wisdom, invites us to consider something radical, that peace is not something we need to find out there. It is not hidden in the next achievement, relationship, or revelation. It is not located in a temple or locked inside a book or granted by a teacher. It is not something you stumble upon one day when all the stars align and your suffering magically ends. The peace you are seeking is already within you. And the journey is not about finding it, it's about remembering. You see, there was a time before the world placed its weight upon your shoulders, before you learned to doubt yourself, before you were told who you should be, when you lived in harmony with your own being. As a child, you didn't question your worth. You didn't carry regret from the past or anxiety about the future. You cried when you were hurt. You laughed when you were joyful. You moved with the rhythm of the present moment. You were at peace, not because you had all the answers, but because you hadn't yet been convinced to question the truth of who you were. That peace is still there. It never left you. It became buried, yes, beneath layers of identity, fear, trauma, expectation. But it is not gone. It is not lost. It is waiting. Waiting in the quiet. Waiting beneath your thoughts, waiting beneath your striving, your stories, your spiritual seeking. In Buddhist meditation, we are not trying to escape the mind. We are simply observing it, watching the thoughts rise and fall like waves on the ocean, watching sensations come and go, watching emotions pass through like clouds. And in that space of observation, we begin to see a deeper layer of our being, a stillness that is untouched by the noise, a presence that remains even when everything else changes. This is the peace you've been looking for, not a feeling that depends on good circumstances, not a fleeting moment of calm, but a baseline of awareness that is always available when we return to now. But why do we forget? Because the world is loud. It pulls us outward. It teaches us that peace must be earned, that we must work harder, become better, achieve more, that stillness is laziness, that self-trust is arrogance, that silence is emptiness. And so we become tangled in doing, in proving, in collecting accomplishments, followers, affirmations, thinking they will finally fill the hollow ache inside. But the more we chase peace, the further it seems to go, because peace does not come from running. It comes from resting, from remembering. To remember means to return, to gather the scattered pieces of yourself and come back home, not to a place, not to a person, but to your own center, your own breath, your own being. This kind of peace cannot be sold to you. It cannot be explained in words. It can only be experienced, felt, touched in those rare moments when you stop trying to fix yourself and simply allow yourself to be. Have you ever sat beneath a tree and felt its stillness? Watched a river move without resistance? Listened to birdsong without naming it? These moments are not empty. They are full of presence, full of being, and they remind you of what you've always known, that life is not something you have to conquer. It is something you are invited to experience, one breath at a time. But how do we return to this peace when life is hard, when grief wraps itself around your chest, when anxiety pounds against your ribs, when loss has left you shattered? This is where the Buddhist path becomes both gentle and powerful. It doesn't tell you to escape your pain. It tells you to be with it, not as an enemy, but as a messenger. Because even in pain, there is stillness underneath. Even in fear, there is awareness. Even in chaos, there is breath. To practice peace is not to eliminate difficulty. It is to meet difficulty with presence. To feel the storm and still remain rooted. To cry and still feel your breath. To fall apart and still know that somewhere inside nothing is broken. This doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, in the small sacred moments. When you close your eyes and breathe deeply, when you place a hand on your heart and whisper, "I am here," when you choose to listen instead of react, when you walk slowly, eat mindfully, speak with intention. Every time you choose to be present, you strengthen your connection to that inner stillness. And the more you remember, the easier it becomes. You begin to notice how much of your suffering was not from what was happening, but from your resistance to it. How many of your wounds came not just from pain, but from believing that pain meant you were broken? How much of your anxiety came not from the future, but from your inability to sit with what was already here? You begin to unlearn the lies. That peace is earned, that you must prove your worth, that you must become someone else before you can rest. And in this unlearning, you return. You return to the breath. You return to the body. You return to the silence that holds you. And you discover that peace is not something fragile, dependent on everything going right. It is something solid, foundational, the very ground of your being. You are not broken. You are buried. And the process of spiritual awakening is not about adding to yourself. It is about peeling back the layers. It is about removing what is not you, the roles, the expectations, the fears, the noise, until what remains is simply presence, pure, software, whole. This is the gift of remembering, and it is available in every moment. When you wash the dishes with full attention, when you look into a child's eyes without distraction, when you forgive yourself for not knowing better, when you sit under the sky and let it speak to you, when you listen, truly listen to your own heartbeat. You don't have to go far. You don't have to do more. You don't have to wait for life to be perfect. You only have to return, again and again, and in that return you will remember what the world tried to make you forget, that you are already enough, that you are already whole, that the peace you seek isn't something to chase. It is something that has been waiting for you, patiently, in the stillness of your own heart. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a sacred spiral. There is a quiet disappointment that often follows the first steps of healing. It's not something people talk about much. You do the inner work. You sit in meditation, you journal, reflect, forgive. You have a breakthrough, you feel light, you feel awakened, you tell yourself, "I'm finally free," and then, out of nowhere, the pain comes back. A familiar sadness returns. An old fear resurfaces. A wound you thought had closed begins to sting again. And you start to wonder, did I go backwards? Am I broken again? But you're not broken, and you haven't gone backwards. You're simply moving in the spiral of healing. Unlike what we're taught, healing is not a straight road with clear mile markers and predictable turns. It doesn't go from pain to peace in a neat one-way direction. It's not a staircase where each step upward means you're closer to some final finish line. It's not a checklist where, once you've cried enough, or journaled enough, or meditated enough, you never hurt again. Healing is not linear. It's cyclical. It's layered. It's alive. In Buddhist understanding, all things arise, change, and dissolve, including pain, including progress, including the versions of ourselves that we thought were healed. What we often interpret as regression is not failure. It is life inviting us deeper, to meet ourselves again, at a new level, with a new heart. Picture a spiral. It moves forward, yes, but it also circles around. You return to the same emotional places, but not as the same person. You revisit the grief, but now with more gentleness. You touch the memory again, but now with more wisdom. You encounter the fear, but now you have tools you didn't have before. It feels familiar, but it is not the same. You are not the same. This spiral is sacred. It teaches you that healing is not about erasing the past. It's about learning how to live in right relationship with it. Your wounds may not vanish, but your response to them transforms. Where you once reacted with shame, you now respond with compassion. Where you once fought to suppress the emotion, you now have the courage to sit beside it in silence. Where you once identified completely with your pain, you now recognize it as a visitor, not a definition of who you are. But because we live in a world obsessed with outcomes and appearances, we are conditioned to believe that healing should look like constant progress, that we should always be getting better, happier, healthier. And when we don't, we feel like imposters, like we've failed at healing, like our sadness means we weren't strong enough. But in Buddhism, the goal is not perfection, it is awareness. And awareness doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion. Sometimes it feels like being lost all over again. And yet, it is still healing, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because healing isn't just about removing pain, it's about becoming someone who can hold pain with presence, someone who doesn't collapse under it, someone who doesn't run from it, someone who can say, I see you, I feel you, and I am still here. This is why the spiral matters, because each time you come around to the same wound, you are offered another chance, a chance to respond differently, to love yourself more fiercely, to forgive more deeply, to choose rest over punishment, to choose stillness over striving. And every time you do, the spiral expands, your capacity grows, your inner space becomes wider, and the wound, though it may still ache, loses its control over your life. In Buddhist teachings, we speak often of samsara, the cycle of suffering that repeats over lifetimes. But even within one lifetime, samsara unfolds in small loops. We find ourselves caught in patterns, in habits, in familiar emotional storms. But each loop carries the possibility of liberation, and the key to breaking free is not in rushing to escape, but in turning toward the experience with mindful compassion. So when old pain returns, pause. Don't say, I'm broken again. Say, this is part of the spiral. When the tears come, let them. Not because you've gone backwards, but because a deeper layer has surfaced. Something is ready to be seen, to be felt, to be held, to be released, not through force, but through presence. You may wonder, when will I be fully healed? But the question itself arises from a misunderstanding. Healing is not a destination you arrive at. It's a relationship you build with your own heart, with your body, with the present moment. It's not something you master. It's something you continue, breath by breath, step by step, day by day. Some days you'll feel radiant, other days you'll feel broken. Both are part of the path. Both are worthy, both are sacred. In Zen practice, there is a phrase, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. This reminds us that spiritual growth does not remove us from life's realities. It deepens our relationship with them. You may still experience sadness, still feel anxiety, still lose your way. But now you meet these moments with open eyes and an open heart. Now you remember to breathe, to bow, to return. And even in the moments you forget, the path is still beneath your feet. This is the kindness of the spiral. It always brings you back. You may not be where you thought you'd be, but you are exactly where you're meant to be. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are willing to keep showing up with softness, with patience, with faith. That's what real healing looks like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of grace. The grace to start again, to forgive yourself again, to listen again, to rest again. The spiral invites you not to measure your healing in timelines, but in tenderness, not in milestones, but in moments of courage. The moment you choose to stay instead of run. The moment you reach out instead of isolate. The moment you place a hand over your heart and whisper, "It's okay." And with each loop around the spiral, you realize that you're not moving in circles. You're moving inward, closer to your center, closer to peace, closer to a version of yourself that is not afraid of being unfinished. Because being unfinished is not the same as being unworthy. It means you are alive. It means you are learning. It means you are healing. And healing, when done with love and awareness, becomes not just a process, but a prayer. A daily return to yourself. Not once, not perfectly, but again and again and again. Until one day, you find yourself in a moment of silence, and you feel it. Not the absence of pain, but the fullness of presence. And you realize, with tears in your eyes and stillness in your chest. This is what healing looks like. And it was never a straight line. It was always a sacred spiral. Stillness is not emptiness. It's where everything begins. In a world that constantly tells us to move faster, do more, achieve higher, and fill every moment with noise or motion, stillness is often misunderstood. It's mistaken for laziness. It's confused with stagnation. It's dismissed as emptiness. People say, "You're doing nothing," as if that's a flaw, as if stillness is something to feel guilty about, as if rest and presence are inferior to productivity and performance. But in Buddhism, stillness is not a void. It is not a lack of value or meaning. It is not a waste of time. Stillness, in its true form, is the most fertile ground of all. It is where everything begins. Before the first breath, there was stillness. Before thought arises, there is stillness. Before action, before movement, before the first word spoken or step taken, there is a moment of silence. And in that space, that sacred pause, something profound is born. A presence, a clarity, a truth that exists before the mind labels it or the world interferes. This stillness is not dead space. It is living awareness. It is pure being. We often think that meaning comes from what we do, that we must keep moving to stay alive. That value comes from effort. And so we run. We fill our calendars, our minds, our conversations. We chase goals, distraction, stimulation, and even spiritual enlightenment as if we must achieve it by force. But what if the most important truths can only be discovered by stopping, by listening, by becoming so quiet that the noise of the world fades and the whisper of the soul can finally be heard? In the Buddhist tradition, meditation is not about escaping reality. It is about entering it more fully, not the reality created by your thoughts, but the one that exists beyond them. When you sit in stillness, you're not doing nothing. You're entering the source. You're placing your awareness at the roots of experience. You're peeling back the layers of thinking, reacting, and interpreting to touch the present moment exactly as it is, without judgment, without desire, without resistance. And in that space, something miraculous happens. You realize that peace is not something you must build or buy or beg for. It's already here, underneath the stress, beneath the endless mental noise. Behind the roles you play and the masks you wear, there is this quiet, unshakable presence. It watches, it waits, it breathes through you even when you forget it's there. Stillness is where you remember who you are before the world told you who to be. But to access this stillness is not always easy. The first time you sit in silence, your mind may scream. Thoughts will rush in, memories, worries, fantasies, regrets. Your body may twitch, your chest may tighten, you may feel restless, irritated, even afraid. And this is normal because we've been trained to fill the silence. To avoid it, we fear what we might find in stillness, our unresolved grief, our unmet needs, our insecurities, our shadow selves. But stillness is not your enemy, it is your mirror, and it reflects back what has always been inside of you, waiting to be held. Think of a lake. When the surface is disturbed by wind, by movement, by falling debris, it becomes cloudy, agitated. But when the surface is still, the water reflects the sky. You can see through it, you can see into it. Stillness in the mind works the same way. It allows you to see, not just the world around you, but the truth of your inner world. It reveals patterns, fears, attachments, and desires, not to judge them, but to understand them, to become free of them, not by force, but by clarity. Buddhism doesn't teach that we must become thoughtless robots. It teaches that we must become conscious of the movements within us, that awareness itself is liberation, and awareness can only arise through stillness. Stillness is also where healing begins. When you're constantly running, you're avoiding. When you're constantly doing, you're escaping. But the pain you carry, the grief, the loneliness, the unmet longing, does not dissolve through motion. It waits. It waits for you to slow down, to turn inward, to breathe. It waits for you to stop trying to outrun your own heart. And when you finally sit still, when you close your eyes and surrender to the quiet, the pain doesn't attack, it begins to speak. It speaks in sensations, in subtle waves, in tightness in your chest, in tears that rise without a clear reason. It speaks in the ache behind your eyes, the sigh in your breath, the heaviness in your shoulders. And as you sit with it, not analyzing, not fixing, just witnessing, it begins to unfold, like a child who just wanted to be held, like an old friend returning after years of silence, like truth gently rising to the surface. This is the sacred medicine of stillness. It reveals, it heals, it reconnects you to the part of yourself that never left. But it's not just healing that happens here. Stillness is also the birthplace of creativity, of insight, of intuition. When your mind is constantly filled with noise, there is no space for inspiration to enter. But when you pause, when you let the mind settle, new ideas arise like blossoms in spring. You see possibilities you couldn't see before. You feel clarity where there was once confusion. You sense the direction of your life, not as a plan, but as an inner pull, a movement that rises naturally from your being, like water flowing downhill. And in this space, even suffering takes on a new shape. It is no longer something to fight. It becomes a doorway, a portal into deeper understanding. Because stillness does not erase pain, but it surrounds it with presence. And that presence, gentle, compassionate, spacious, becomes the balm. Stillness is also how we connect to others. True connection does not come from the words we speak. It comes from presence, from your ability to sit with someone without needing to fix them, impress them, or change them. When you are still, truly still, people feel safe around you. They soften, they open. Because stillness radiates peace, and peace is magnetic. In a noisy world, stillness is revolutionary. It says, I will not be rushed. It says, I will listen. It says, I will trust the wisdom that comes in silence. It says, I am not afraid of the truth that lives in quiet places. But cultivating stillness requires courage. It requires you to step out of the current of urgency and into the flow of presence. It requires you to say no to the constant tug of productivity, comparison, and distraction. And this is not easy, because the world will not slow down for you. You must choose to slow down within it. And when you do, you'll begin to notice what others miss. You'll hear the sound of wind through the trees as if for the first time. You'll see the way light touches the face of a loved one. You'll feel your breath not as a function, but as a gift. You'll discover that every moment, no matter how ordinary, is quietly extraordinary when met with full presence. Stillness teaches you to stop reaching and start receiving, to stop striving and start being, to stop searching for peace and start embodying it. And most of all, stillness teaches you to trust that you don't have to have all the answers, that you don't have to do it all alone, that beneath all the questions, there is a place inside you that already knows, that has always known. Stillness is not a retreat from life, it is the foundation of life. It is where everything begins. Letting things be is sometimes the most powerful choice. There is an instinct in all of us to fix, to control, to manage, to shape the world around us according to what we believe it should be. When something feels uncomfortable, our first response is often to push against it. When someone behaves in a way we don't understand, we try to change them. When life doesn't go according to plan, we tense up, resist, and demand a different outcome. And while this reaction is deeply human, it is also deeply exhausting. Because the more we try to control everything outside of us, the more we suffer inside. Buddhism teaches a radically different path. It whispers, let it be. Not in resignation, not in defeat, but in wise surrender. In understanding that sometimes the most powerful response to chaos, pain, and imperfection is not to resist, but to allow. To stop interfering, to let the moment breathe, to let the story unfold as it must, not as we wish. This idea, simple on the surface, holds profound depth. It challenges our conditioning. It invites us into a spaciousness that most of us are not used to. Because we've been taught that strength looks like taking action. That peace is something we must create through force. That healing is always about doing something, but letting things be is not the same as doing nothing. It is the quiet, grounded strength of choosing to sit with what is, without panic, without manipulation, without demand. Letting things be doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you stop trying to force your timing on the universe. It means you stop demanding that people be ready before they are. It means you stop turning every moment into a battle to be won, and instead you begin to soften, to trust, to breathe into the present with all its messiness and mystery. In Buddhist philosophy, non-attachment is not about being indifferent. It's about being deeply engaged without being entangled. When you let something be, you are still fully present, you are still aware, you are still feeling, but you are no longer grasping, you are no longer reacting from fear, you are responding from a place of clarity, of compassion, of wisdom. This is not weakness, this is power, the kind of power that does not scream, the kind of power that does not dominate, the kind of power that holds space for life to move in its own way, in its own time. There are moments in life when everything in you will want to act. When someone says something hurtful and you want to retaliate. When something feels uncertain and you want to force an answer. When a person you love is making choices you don't agree with and you want to step in and take over. But in those moments, ask yourself gently, what if I just let this be? What if I stopped trying to change it and instead sat with it, watched it, allowed it? Letting things be doesn't mean you stop setting boundaries. It doesn't mean you accept abuse. It doesn't mean you become passive. What it means is that you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You stop taking on the emotional labor of fixing everyone else's path. You stop thinking that your peace depends on external outcomes being perfect, because it doesn't. Real peace is not found in everything going your way. Real peace is found in letting go of your insistence that it must. The lotus flower grows in the mud, and it does not argue with the mud. It does not complain about the water's temperature or the texture of the soil. It simply grows. It opens, petal by petal, toward the light, without resistance. Your life is like that. It may not look how you imagined. It may be filled with things you didn't ask for. But if you can stop fighting the moment, if you can sit with it in its rawness, if you can breathe without trying to fix it, you may find something blooming within you, something stronger, something softer, something wiser. One of the reasons letting things be is so difficult is because the mind constantly wants resolution, it wants closure, it wants clarity, it wants the happy ending, the satisfying explanation, the neat conclusion. But life rarely gives us that on demand. People leave without saying goodbye. Relationships end without full understanding. Illness arrives without warning. Dreams dissolve. And sometimes there is no answer that makes it all make sense. The mind says, "This is incomplete." But the heart, when listened to carefully, says, "Even this can be held." When you let things be, you begin to understand that your suffering was not always caused by what happened. It was caused by your resistance to what happened, by your insistence that it should have been otherwise, by your refusal to let go of the way you thought things were supposed to unfold. And this realization is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. Because the moment you allow things to be as they are, you free yourself from the burden of needing life to match your expectations. This doesn't mean you lose your dreams. It means you stop believing that your happiness is dependent on them coming true in a specific way. It doesn't mean you stop taking action. It means you act from love, not from fear, from presence, not from panic. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care without clinging. And in this space, this sacred pause where you allow life to breathe, you begin to notice something remarkable. You begin to feel peace where you used to feel pressure. You begin to feel love where you used to feel resentment. You begin to feel trust where you used to feel control. Letting things be is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. A moment-to-moment return to the breath, to the body, to the present. You may catch yourself grasping, forcing, manipulating. And that's okay. You don't need to judge yourself. You only need to return. Letting be means allowing your emotions to arise without labeling them as good or bad. It means letting your grief take its time, letting your confusion sit quietly beside you without demanding answers. Letting your joy fill you completely without fearing that it won't last. Letting people be on their own journeys, even if they take roads you wouldn't choose. Letting your own healing unfold without a deadline. Letting the past be the past. Letting the future come in its own time. Letting the present be enough. This kind of surrender is not dramatic. It is subtle. It's a softening in the belly, a loosening in the chest, a breath that doesn't rush, a moment where you stop trying to carry what was never yours to hold. There is a Zen proverb that says, "Sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself." It sounds simple, even naive, but it contains a deep truth. Some things in life are not meant to be forced. Some healing happens only when we stop interfering. Some answers come only in stillness. Some love can only grow in freedom. So ask yourself gently, where am I trying too hard to fix what isn't mine to fix? Where am I clinging to control, thinking that it will bring peace? What would happen if I just let it be, for now, just for a moment, and trusted that life is still unfolding, even if I don't understand how? Letting things be is not giving up, it is giving over. Giving over the burden of needing to know. Giving over the exhausting responsibility of managing every outcome. giving over the illusion that you are in charge of how everything turns out. And in that giving over, something sacred begins. You feel the earth beneath you. You feel your breath rising and falling. You feel the presence of the moment, not perfect, but alive. And you remember, not through thought, but through experience, that this moment, just as it is enough. Let it be, and let yourself be. Because sometimes the most powerful choice is not to change the moment, but to change the way you hold it. Freedom begins the moment you stop needing to be understood. There is a deep longing that lives quietly inside most of us, a desire that feels so familiar we rarely question its origin. The desire to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Not for who we pretend to be, not for the image we project, but for who we truly are beneath the surface, our emotions, our hopes, our wounds, our silence, our intentions. We want someone to look at us and say, "I see you, I get you, I understand." And when that happens, even for a brief moment, it feels like a miracle. A kind of relief floods the body. We soften, we open, we feel safe, we feel real, we feel like we belong. But what happens when that moment doesn't come? What happens when the people we love most misunderstand our silence? When our efforts are misinterpreted? When our story is twisted or unseen? When our truth is dismissed? When we try to explain, to share, to reach out, only to be met with judgment, distance, or confusion? The pain of being misunderstood cuts deep, not just because we weren't heard, but because it triggers a deeper fear that we might be unworthy of being known, that maybe our truth doesn't matter, that maybe, in all our attempts to be honest, open and loving, we've only made things worse. And so we shrink, we retreat, or we try harder, we over-explain, we overthink. We contort ourselves to fit into someone else's understanding. But the harder we try to be understood by everyone, the further we drift from ourselves. Buddhist wisdom teaches us a very different lesson, one that offers both relief and challenge. That freedom begins the moment you stop needing to be understood. This teaching is not cold. It is not a dismissal of human connection. It does not say that understanding is meaningless or that love should be indifferent. What it does say is that your liberation cannot be built on something so fragile, so inconsistent, and so impermanent as the approval or comprehension of others. It says that your inner peace must not depend on how well others see you, because even the kindest people will sometimes miss you. Even the most loving souls may not be able to hold the full truth of your experience. And that is okay, because the path of true peace is not paved by being understood by others. It is paved by understanding yourself. To walk the spiritual path means learning how to stand inside your own truth, even when no one else recognizes it. It means holding your heart with tenderness, even when others minimize your pain. It means continuing to love, to speak gently, to move with integrity, even when others misunderstand your silence, your boundaries, your distance, or your choices. This is not easy, especially when the misunderstanding comes from those closest to us, from family, from friends, from people we've opened our hearts to. When we are misread by strangers, we can brush it off. But when those we love don't get us, it can feel like a rejection of our very soul. But Buddhism teaches us that clinging, even to understanding, creates suffering. The desire to be seen is natural, but the attachment to being understood by everyone is a trap. Because no one, no matter how wise or loving, can fully understand what it means to be you. Only you have lived inside your body every day of your life. Only you have felt every breath, every heartbeat, every tremor of fear and flicker of joy. Only you have walked with your particular memories, your exact doubts, your private dreams. So how could anyone else fully see what you see? How could they hear every layer in your voice or feel every wound behind your words? They can't. And that's not a flaw in them or in you. It's simply the nature of human experience. We are all walking through life with different eyes, different wounds, different stories. And those differences make understanding possible, but also limited. The freedom comes when you stop trying to force others to understand you and start standing gently, quietly, and confidently inside your own knowing. You stop explaining every decision. You stop apologizing for your feelings. You stop proving your worth, your pain, your path. And you begin to trust that it's enough for you to know what's true. This doesn't mean you become arrogant or isolated. It means you become rooted. It means your sense of self is no longer shaped like clay, constantly molded by the opinions and perceptions of others. Instead, it becomes like a mountain, still, grounded, unmoved by passing winds. When you release the need to be understood, something softens inside. You no longer argue with reality. You stop carrying the burden of trying to translate your soul for people who may not be ready to listen. You stop twisting your truth into something more digestible, more likable, more acceptable. You simply become yourself. And in that becoming, you radiate something rare, something that others may not always understand, but will always feel: peace. Letting go of the need to be understood also means letting go of control. Because understanding is something we cannot force. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be extracted. It can only be offered freely from the heart of someone willing and ready to receive it. And sometimes people aren't ready, not because they are cruel or unkind, but because they are caught in their own narratives, their own pain, their own limitations. When someone cannot understand you, it often has more to do with their filters than your truth. You may remind them of a past they haven't healed. You may speak a language of honesty that they are not yet fluent in. You may embody a kind of freedom they're not ready to claim for themselves. And so they resist, they deflect, they turn away. And you must let them, not with bitterness, but with love. Because understanding is not a currency you must beg for. It is a gift. And like all gifts, it must come willingly. When it does, it is beautiful, it is holy, it is rare. And when it doesn't, you can still be at peace, because your worth is not diminished by someone else's inability to see it. Your truth does not disappear because someone else doubts it. Your light does not go out because someone else doesn't know how to receive it. And your path does not become less sacred just because it is walked in silence. To no longer need to be understood is to be free. Free to speak with sincerity, not strategy. Free to walk away without resentment. Free to rest without explaining. Free to change without defending. Free to love without needing it to be mirrored. Free to feel without translating your emotions into something palatable. Free to live a life that makes sense to your soul, even if it confuses the world. In meditation, we practice sitting with the breath. Not to escape the world, but to come home to ourselves. And in that home, no one else needs to understand what is happening. It is yours. It is sacred. It is enough. The more you trust that, the less you seek approval. The more you return to your inner knowing, the less you fear being misunderstood. Because eventually you see that understanding yourself is the beginning of liberation. And no one can take that from you. You carry your peace not in words, but in presence. Not in validation, but in stillness. Not in being seen, but in seeing yourself clearly. And that clarity, that quiet knowing, is freedom. You are not lost, you are just becoming. There will be seasons in your life when everything familiar seems to slip through your fingers. You wake up one day, and the person in the mirror no longer looks like who you used to be. The dreams that once lit your path now feel distant, hazy, almost foreign. The relationships that once gave you comfort have shifted, some quietly fading, others breaking with painful clarity. Your thoughts feel scattered, your emotions unpredictable, your footing uncertain. You look around at your life, its patterns, its textures, its rhythm, and it no longer fits. You begin to wonder, what happened to me? Who am I now? Where am I going? And then the deeper question, the most haunting of them all, begins to whisper, "Am I lost?" This question is not a weakness. It is not a failure. It is the call of awakening. It is the first stirring of something profound within you, a quiet signal that the life you've been living is no longer in alignment with the truth of who you are becoming. In Buddhism, this moment of disorientation is not seen as a detour or a downfall. It is seen as a sacred stage of transformation, the cocoon stage, the space between who you were and who you are yet to become. You are not lost. You are dissolving, and the path of dissolving is not linear, nor is it comfortable. It is wild and tender and full of unknowns. It requires that you shed what no longer resonates, even when you don't yet know what will take its place. It requires that you release identities, attachments, and roles that once gave you structure, even if it leaves you floating in the in-between. But there is something beautiful hidden here, something the world often overlooks. This lostness is not a curse. It is a portal, a sacred passage, a spiritual initiation. It is the fertile ground of becoming. In Buddhist teachings, becoming is not just the movement towards something new. It is the shedding of illusion, the disintegration of false self, the unraveling of ego-driven narratives that once held you tightly. To become who you truly are, you must first allow who you are not to fall away. And that process can feel like being lost, but it is, in fact, the first step toward freedom. Imagine walking through a dense forest in the fog. You can no longer see the trail you came from, and the road ahead is unclear. You feel unanchored, vulnerable, alone. But what if you could learn to trust this fog? What if the forest was not meant to be navigated with certainty, but with presence? What if the fog was not blocking your path, but deepening your awareness? Being in the in-between is a deeply spiritual experience. It strips away the distractions. It silences the external noise. It humbles the mind that thinks it always knows best. And in that silence, in that surrender, the heart begins to whisper truths you may have never heard before. Truths that come not from logic, but from lived experience, from intuition, from the quiet voice of your inner teacher. It is here, in this raw space, that you begin to feel deeply, honestly, fully. And though it may be painful, this feeling is not a mistake. It is the cracking open that makes room for the truth to enter. It is the dissolving that precedes becoming. But the mind resists. It craves labels, certainty, answers. It wants to name this phase as wrong, as broken, as lost. It says, "You should know better by now. You should have it figured out. You should be further along." And each time you believe it, you tighten the knot of suffering around your heart. But the truth is, becoming has no map. The soul does not follow straight lines. The heart does not bloom on command. Healing does not obey your schedule. Growth is not a linear staircase. It is a spiral. It brings you back to old wounds with new eyes. It asks you to surrender control, to breathe into the mess, to allow the unfolding. And this unfolding is sacred. It is in this space, this in-between, that you learn to love without needing definitions, that you learn to be still even in discomfort, that you begin to release the need to perform, to impress, to meet anyone's expectations, including your own. You stop striving to become someone and start listening to what's trying to emerge from within. You discover that the version of yourself you're becoming isn't someone new, it's someone you've always been beneath the noise, someone softer, wiser, more rooted in truth. This shift is not visible on the outside. There are no trophies for this kind of growth, no applause, no clear milestones. But the changes are real. You begin to speak differently. You choose silence over reaction. You sit with your emotions instead of running from them. You stop forcing connections that don't honor your soul. You begin to forgive yourself, not because you've perfected anything, but because you're tired of the war inside. And slowly you begin to trust the process, not because it gets easier, but because you start to see its rhythm, its wisdom. You begin to recognize that the pain has purpose, that the confusion is clearing the space, that the stillness is where the seeds of the new life are being planted. This is the heart of Buddhist practice, the courage to be with what is, to stop escaping the moment, to stop needing it to be anything other than what it is. And in doing so, you create the space for transformation to unfold naturally. You begin to understand that you don't need to know exactly where you're going to be on the right path, that life isn't asking you to have a plan, it's asking you to have presence, that you don't need to have it all figured out to take the next step. You just need to be willing to show up, fully, honestly, with an open heart. The greatest shifts in your life will not come when you are certain, they will come when you are honest. Honest enough to say, I don't know who I am becoming, but I trust what's falling away. Honest enough to say, I feel lost, but I'm choosing to stay open. Honest enough to sit with the discomfort without rushing to label it as failure. Because becoming is not about becoming better. It's about becoming more real, more present, more awake. And sometimes the only way to find your true path is to let the false one dissolve. Sometimes the only way to hear your inner voice is to let the outer world fall silent. Sometimes the only way to become is to get lost, deeply, beautifully, courageously lost, so that you can come home to yourself in a way you never have before. So if you are in that place right now, if your heart feels heavy, if your mind is full of doubt, if the path ahead looks blurry and the past no longer feels like a place you belong, take a deep breath. You are not broken. You are not late. You are not falling behind. You are becoming, and this moment, this confusion, this sacred mess is part of the unfolding. Don't rush it. Don't try to define it. Don't try to make it look like someone else's journey. Just be here. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel your breath. Feel your heart beating. This is what becoming feels like. It's not always clarity. It's not always peace. Sometimes it's ache. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's letting go of everything you thought you needed. But in that letting go, you make space. Space for truth. Space for softness. Space for a life that is no longer built from who you think you should be, but from the truth of who you already are. So no, you are not lost. You are in the middle of becoming. And one day, not far from now, you'll look back on this season, not with shame, but with reverence. You'll say, that was the moment I stopped running. That was the moment I stopped pretending. That was the moment I finally met myself. And when that day comes, you'll realize you were never lost. You were just on your way home. True strength is learning to stay soft in a hard world. The world often measures strength by how hard we become. We are taught that to survive, we must shield ourselves, that to win, we must compete, that to be respected, we must dominate. From an early age, we are conditioned to believe that vulnerability is weakness, that emotion is instability, that gentleness is a flaw to be corrected. And so we begin to harden, not all at once, but gradually, quietly. We toughen up, we stop crying, we stop asking for help. We hide our sensitivity beneath performance, distraction, or silence. We put on armor, not because we want to, but because we feel we must. This armor becomes our identity. We take pride in being unshakable, in holding it all together, in being the one who never breaks. We call it strength. But underneath the surface, we are aching. Beneath the polished exterior, there is a silent fatigue, a numbness, a longing to be soft again. Buddhist wisdom offers a different understanding of strength, one that does not require us to become harder, but asks us to become more open, more present, more whole. True strength, it says, is not found in resistance, but in surrender. Not in the tightening of the heart, but in its expansion. Not in the denial of our humanity, but in our ability to embrace it fully. To be soft in a hard world is not to be naive. It is not to be weak. It is to remain rooted in compassion even when life tries to convince you that cynicism is safer. It is to keep your heart open even after it's been bruised. It is to choose empathy when anger would be easier. It is to remain present with your pain instead of numbing it. It is to forgive, not because the other person deserves it, but because your soul does. Softness in this sense is a spiritual discipline. It asks you to stay connected to your breath when the world is shouting at you to react. It asks you to respond with kindness when your ego is burning for revenge. It asks you to see the humanity in others, even when they cannot see it in you. This kind of softness does not come naturally. It must be cultivated. It must be chosen, again and again. Because the truth is, it is much easier to harden, to become guarded, to shut down. When life hurts us, when we are betrayed, dismissed, overlooked, violated, it is natural to want to build walls, to tell ourselves, never again. To believe that the only way to protect our peace is to distance ourselves from love, from feeling, from life itself. But walls, no matter how strong, don't just keep the pain out. They keep the joy out too. They keep connection out. They keep life out. And over time, we begin to forget what it feels like to be fully alive. To live with an open heart is not to invite harm. It is to live with awareness. It is to acknowledge the risk and still choose love. It is to understand the fragility of life and still choose to lean into its beauty. It is to accept the reality of suffering and still choose not to become bitter. In Buddhism, the heart is often referred to as citta, a word that includes both mind and heart in one. The practice is not to separate intellect from emotion, but to unify them, to create a mind that thinks clearly and a heart that feels deeply, to cultivate awareness that is balanced by compassion. And in this union, a quiet strength emerges, not the strength that needs to prove itself, but the kind that radiates from within. This strength is soft, but it is unshakable. It doesn't break when criticized. It listens. It doesn't collapse under pain. It breathes. It doesn't fear emotion. It welcomes it. And this strength, once rooted, begins to transform everything. It changes how you speak. Your words become slower, kinder, more thoughtful. You speak not to dominate, but to connect. You listen not to reply, but to understand. It changes how you walk through conflict. You stop needing to win. You begin seeking resolution. You realize that being right is far less important than being at peace. It changes how you carry your past. You stop defining yourself by what hurt you. You begin to release the need to hold on. You grieve what was lost. You bless what was given. And you move forward, not with resentment, but with grace. It changes how you see other people. You begin to notice their wounds beneath their words. You see their anger not as a personal attack, but as an expression of their own suffering. You stop needing others to be perfect. You love them where they are without needing to change them. It changes how you treat yourself. You stop punishing yourself for not healing fast enough. You stop demanding constant productivity. You begin to offer yourself the same compassion you offer others. You rest. You breathe. You learn to sit in silence without judging the silence. This is not a weakness. This is the highest form of courage. To stay soft is to remain aligned with your true nature. Because beneath the layers of armor, beneath the ego, beneath the pain, beneath the story, you are softness. You are spaciousness. You are awareness itself. The journey is not to become someone new. It is to return, to peel back the layers, to come home to the part of you that has always known how to love. But coming home requires you to let go of the need to be unbreakable. Let go of the belief that vulnerability is dangerous. Let go of the illusion that control is safety. Let go of the pressure to perform, to please, to perfect. Let go of the idea that strength means never needing anyone. Let go of the shame that tells you softness is something to be ashamed of. And as you let go, as you soften, you begin to feel again. Not just the pain, but the joy. Not just the fear, but the freedom. Not just the confusion, but the clarity that comes when you stop trying so hard to hold it all together. There is a Zen teaching that says, "The flexible tree bends in the wind, the rigid tree breaks." This is the wisdom of softness. It doesn't resist the storm, it flows with it. It doesn't shatter under pressure, it yields, and in yielding, it survives, it grows, it flourishes. In a world that tells you to toughen up, the most radical thing you can do is soften down. To pause, to breathe, to feel, to cry when the moment calls for it, to laugh fully when the joy arrives, to love with your whole heart, even when you know it might break. Because hearts are not meant to be hidden behind walls. They are meant to beat freely, to expand, to be felt, to be shared. And if the world doesn't understand your softness, let that be their work. Your work is to remain true, true to your nature, true to your light, true to your capacity to hold pain without becoming it, true to your ability to be gentle and grounded at the same time. You do not have to be hardened to be strong. You do not have to be perfect to be powerful. You only have to be present. You only have to be real. You only have to be willing to stay soft, even when the world feels hard. Because in that softness lives your truest strength. And it is the kind of strength that can never be broken. Real peace isn't found in the absence of chaos, but in how you hold yourself within it. We are often taught to imagine peace as a destination, something distant, something that exists only after the noise ends, after the struggles are resolved, after the world becomes soft and kind and simple again. We wait for circumstances to align, for conflict to dissolve, for our minds to settle before we allow ourselves to rest. Peace, we are told, is what comes when everything is finally under control. But what if that idea of peace is only half the truth? What if the peace we long for isn't something that appears when the chaos is gone, but something that can be cultivated right in the center of the storm? In the teachings of Buddhism, real peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is not a world free of change, grief, conflict, or discomfort. Real peace is not something fragile that must be protected from life. It is something strong that exists within life. It is not something we create through avoidance, but something we remember through presence. Peace is not when the world quiets down. Peace is when you quiet down inside the world. And this kind of peace, deep, stable, rooted, does not come from escaping chaos. It comes from learning how to hold yourself inside it. Chaos is part of life. There will always be change, always be noise, always be uncertainty. The people you love will sometimes leave or hurt you. The plans you've built will sometimes fall apart. The mind will sometimes spiral. The world will sometimes burn. And no amount of discipline, productivity, or spiritual practice will eliminate these things. But what you can cultivate is a way of being, a way of returning to yourself, that remains steady even when everything else is trembling. This is the essence of the middle path in Buddhism, not swinging from extreme to extreme, not needing life to be perfect to feel contentment, not depending on outer stillness to access inner stillness. It's about finding that quiet center within you and learning how to live from there, even as everything around you moves. Imagine yourself as a candle. When the wind picks up, when the room becomes loud, when the world outside rattles and shakes, the flame might flicker, but it doesn't go out, because the wick is protected, rooted, sustained. Your peace is like that flame. It will waver, yes. You are human. You will feel fear, doubt, anger, sadness. But if you learn to protect the flame, not by hiding from life, but by staying centered, you can carry your peace with you into any space. So how do we do that? How do we hold ourselves when life becomes loud? How do we return to peace when the mind is busy, the heart is aching, and the world feels overwhelming? It begins, as it always does in Buddhist practice, with the breath. The breath is the anchor, the reminder, the doorway back to now. When you feel yourself spinning, when the stories in your mind are growing louder than the moment itself, pause. Place a hand on your chest or your belly. Close your eyes if you can, and breathe. Not to fix anything, not to change anything, but to remember that you are here. Inhale and feel the air move in. Exhale and let something soften. Again. Again. You are not trying to stop the chaos. You are learning to stay present inside it. And that shift, small, subtle, sacred, is everything. From that place, begin to observe. What is the body doing? Is there tension? Where? What is the mind saying? What thoughts are looping? What emotions are rising? Can you name them gently? What are you believing in this moment? And is it true? This is mindfulness, not a performance, not a trend, a way of looking, a way of witnessing, a way of being with what is, instead of being caught in what you wish it was. And the more you practice this, the more you begin to notice that peace is not a place you arrive at once and stay in forever. It is something you return to, moment by moment, breath by breath, sometimes 100 times a day, and each return is a victory. Each return is a reminder that you are not at the mercy of your environment, that your nervous system is not powerless, that your spirit is not bound to the chaos it sees, that there is something inside you, beneath the thought, beneath the noise, that is always still, always aware, always whole. This still point is what meditation leads us to, not just when we are sitting on the cushion, but in every moment of life. Washing dishes, driving to work, listening to a friend, mourning a loss, standing in the middle of uncertainty. The practice is not about removing yourself from life. It is about showing up fully in life, grounded, aware, compassionate. So when the chaos comes, as it always will, you do not say, "This should not be happening." You say, "This is what is here. Let me meet it with presence." When someone speaks to you with anger, you breathe. You feel the reaction rising. You witness the urge to defend, and instead of lashing out, you respond from stillness. When the mind begins to spiral into fear, into regret, into judgment, you notice, you name it. You do not push it away. You do not feed it either. You say, thinking, and then you return to the body, to the breath, to now. When grief floods your chest, you do not numb it. You do not run. You hold it gently. You say, "This too belongs." You let the tears come. You let the heart ache. And in that ache, you remember that feeling is not the opposite of peace. It is part of peace, because real peace is not sanitized. It is not emotionless. It does not require you to be unshakable. It only asks that you stay awake, awake to your body, awake to your breath, awake to the moment. And from that place of wakefulness, the chaos begins to lose its grip. Not because it vanishes, but because you stop fighting it. You stop needing it to go away before you can rest. You rest right inside it. And slowly you become a space where peace is possible, where others feel safe, where silence is welcome, where wisdom can rise, where the noise doesn't control you because you are listening more deeply to what is underneath it. This kind of peace becomes your home. It's not always comfortable, but it's always real. And the more you return to it, the more it grows. So when the storms come, and they will, don't panic, don't harden, don't abandon yourself. Breathe, pause, return. This is how peace is made, not by escaping the world, but by remembering that your center is strong enough to hold it. The wound is not the end, it's where the light begins. There comes a time in every person's journey when the weight of pain feels unbearable. A wound appears, suddenly or slowly over time. Sometimes it is the loss of someone you loved so deeply that their absence leaves a silence louder than any noise. Sometimes it is betrayal from someone you trusted so much that the memory of their touch becomes a kind of sorrow. Sometimes it is not a single moment, but a slow erosion of joy. The feeling that life has chipped away at your spirit one disappointment at a time until you barely recognize who you were before it all happened. In these moments, the mind wants to scream, "Why me?" And the heart quietly wonders, Will I ever be whole again? We are conditioned to think of pain as an ending, as the final scene in a story that once held so much promise. We believe the wound is where something good dies, where the path is lost, where life changes for the worse and cannot be recovered. But in Buddhist teachings, the wound is never the end. It is not the last word. It is not the collapse of all meaning. It is the doorway, the beginning, the sacred crack through which light enters a life that has been too tightly closed. The wound is where transformation begins, not through force, not through denial, not through distraction, but through awareness. In the Buddhist sutras, suffering is not dismissed or covered up. It is explored, it is understood, it is even honored. Why? Because suffering is not a punishment. It is a teacher. It arrives not to destroy you, but to reveal what has been waiting in the silence. It breaks the illusions we've built around comfort. It dissolves the false narratives we told ourselves to feel safe. It takes us by the hand and leads us deeper, not into despair, but into truth. The truth is, every person you admire has been wounded. Every master you study has walked through pain. Every soul you find peaceful has met darkness and chosen to stay awake within it. The lotus, one of the most revered symbols in Buddhism, does not grow in clean waters. It blooms from the mud, from filth, from rot, from depths where no light penetrates. But it rises, slowly, silently. With each day, it pushes through the heavy waters, not in haste but in patience, not with violence but with quiet determination. And one morning it opens, not in protest but in surrender. It becomes beauty, not by avoiding the mud but by growing through it. Your wound is that mud. You may not have chosen it, you may not understand it, but within it lies the very condition for your awakening, not in spite of it, but because of it. The mind wants to heal by forgetting, but the soul heals by remembering, by going back, by sitting with the ache, by feeling every shard of pain without turning away. Healing, in the Buddhist way, is not a quick fix. It is a slow return to wholeness. It is the practice of bringing awareness to the places we've abandoned within ourselves. When a wound opens, our first instinct is to close around it, to hide it, to pretend we are fine. But what we resist persists. What we avoid grows stronger in the shadows. And so the practice becomes one of turning toward the wound, gently, slowly, with presence. Ask yourself, where does it hurt? What emotion is there? Is it sadness, fear, shame, anger? Can you stay with it, not to fix it, but to understand it? Can you breathe into it, not to make it disappear, but to soften your resistance? Every wound holds a message, not a message about your failure, but about your depth, not about your brokenness, but about your capacity to love. You are not hurting because you are weak. You are hurting because you dared to care, because your heart is not numb, because you are alive. And this is where the light begins. Not in the moment everything is solved, but in the moment you decide to stop running. The moment you sit with your pain and say, I see you. The moment you realize that even in your ache, you are whole. That even in your uncertainty, you are still on the path. That even in your despair, you have not lost your light. You have simply covered it. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he did not run from suffering. He faced it. Mara, the personification of fear, doubt, temptation, came to him in the night. But the Buddha did not fight Mara. He did not scream or hide. He looked at Mara and said, I see you. And then he stayed seated. He stayed still. And in that stillness, he awakened. This is the path. Not resistance, but recognition. When pain visits you, greet it like a teacher. When grief enters your home, offer it tea. When sadness floods your chest, breathe deeper. Not because these things are easy, but because they are real. And because the only way to transform your suffering is to feel it all the way through. This is not romantic. It is not poetic in the way we sometimes wish healing could be. It is raw. It is messy. It is tiring. Some days you will cry. Some nights you will feel alone, even in a room full of people. Some mornings it will take everything in you just to rise and sit and breathe. But slowly, silently, the light begins to rise inside the wound. You start to notice beauty again, not as a performance, but as a quiet awareness. You begin to smile again, not to prove your strength, but to reflect your truth. You start to trust again, not because you forgot the betrayal, but because your heart wants to open more than it wants to protect. You begin to live, not from the scar, but from the lesson. The wound will leave a mark. It is not meant to be erased. It is part of your story now, but that story is not a tragedy. It is a sacred text, a testament to your survival, a blueprint for your compassion, a reminder that nothing was wasted, not even the pain. You are not here to be unscarred. You are here to be real. You are not here to be untouched. You are here to be awakened. And the wound, that place that once brought you to your knees, may become the very place through which others find their way. Because your healing is never just about you. It ripples, it softens the air around you. It changes how you speak, how you listen, how you hold space, and it makes you more human, more whole, more light. So when you look at your wound, do not turn away. Do not wish it had never come. Do not define yourself by the pain, but don't deny its place in your becoming. Say instead, "This is where the light began," and let it shine. Let go of what you wanted. Make room for what you need. There's a quiet ache that lives in every human being. Sometimes it whispers in the stillness of the night. Sometimes it roars through the noise of the day. It's the longing for something that never arrived, the dream that never bloomed, the love that slipped away, or the plan that collapsed in your hands. It's the sorrow of wanting life to be one way and watching it unfold into something entirely different. From childhood, we begin building a vision of how life should be. We imagine the people we'll have beside us, the places we'll live, the things we'll accomplish, the versions of ourselves we hope to one day become. And we attach to these visions not just with hope, but with identity. We say, "This is who I'll be, this is what I'll do, this is how it must go." But life, unfolding as it is, governed not by our desires but by impermanence, doesn't always obey those plans. Sometimes the door you've been knocking on for years never opens. Sometimes the person you believed would walk with you forever takes a different path. Sometimes your body betrays you. Sometimes your best effort still ends in failure. And in those moments, the pain is not just in the loss itself. It's in the crumbling of who you thought you'd be. And yet, the path of wisdom, the path of awakening, begins the moment we learn to release what we thought we needed and make space for what is actually meant to nourish us. In Buddhist teaching, this process is not just encouraged, it is essential. The root of suffering, as taught by the Buddha, is attachment. We suffer not because life changes, but because we resist that change. We hold too tightly to expectations, to outcomes, to ideas of how things should be. And in that grip, we lose the ability to receive what is actually here. Letting go does not mean giving up. It does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means loosening your grip on what was never yours to control, so you can finally hold what was always meant to nourish your soul. Letting go is not an act of defeat. It is an act of maturity. It is not resignation, it is recognition. It is the deep bow to life as it is, not as we wished it to be. And when you begin to let go of what you wanted, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to show you what you truly need. But first, before the peace, before the clarity, there is often grief. You must allow yourself to mourn the dream. You must let the tears fall for the story that won't be told. You must sit in the quiet of all the endings and allow your heart to break, not just once, but as many times as it needs to, in order to become honest. There is no shame in grieving what you once held dear, whether it was a career path, a relationship, a version of yourself you thought you'd grow into. Every ending deserves a funeral, even if the world doesn't understand the depth of your sorrow. And yet, even in that sorrow, something soft begins to form. In the spaciousness that comes from surrender, a deeper truth begins to rise. You begin to see that many of the things you were chasing were not rooted in your highest self, but in fear, in ego, in comparison, in the desire to feel worthy. You begin to realize that what you wanted was often based on who you were before you suffered, before you were cracked open, before life taught you what really matters. You realize that the love you were begging for was not love at all, but attachment, that the success you idolized was not freedom, but another kind of cage, that the version of yourself you were trying so hard to become was not your soul, but your armor. And in that realization, something begins to loosen. You begin to soften, not because you are giving up on life, but because you are finally aligning with it. This is what it means to make room for what you need. It means allowing life to rearrange your priorities. It means trusting that the universe, in its wisdom, sometimes strips away not to punish you, but to free you. It means seeing each closed door not as a rejection, but as a redirection. It means believing that even the detour may be the actual path, and that just because it doesn't look like the dream doesn't mean it isn't sacred. When you release the tight grip of wanting, you begin to walk with open hands. And with open hands, you can receive. You can receive the unexpected friendship that enters quietly after your heartbreak. You can receive the new passion that ignites after your old plans fall apart. You can receive the stillness, the silence, the breath that reminds you that being alive is itself a miracle. You begin to want less and live more. You stop chasing and start witnessing. You stop performing and start becoming. This is the transformation. This is the quiet revolution of letting go. But it is not something you do once. It is something you do again and again. Each morning you wake and say, "Today I release the idea that I must earn love. Today I release the belief that my worth depends on achievement. Today I release the fear that I am behind. Today I release the illusion that I am in control." And each evening you bow your head and whisper, "Thank you for what stayed. Thank you for what left. Thank you for what's yet to come." The practice of letting go is the practice of trust. Trust that what is meant for you will not pass you. Trust that even the pain has purpose. Trust that the path is being laid even when you cannot see the bricks. Trust that what you need is more beautiful, more lasting, more aligned than anything you ever dared to want. And so, when your heart feels heavy with disappointment, when you feel like screaming at the sky, when nothing makes sense anymore, pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, am I holding on to a picture of life that no longer fits the person I am becoming? If the answer is yes, don't judge yourself. Don't rush. Just begin the slow, sacred practice of opening your hand. Let one thing go, a thought, a memory, a version of the future. Let it drift, and then wait. And in that waiting, notice what begins to come in. Maybe it's a sense of peace. Maybe it's an unexpected opportunity. Maybe it's the realization that you're already okay. Maybe it's the first breath you've taken in weeks that didn't feel like survival. Whatever it is, receive it and say thank you, because you are no longer living from lack. You are no longer defining yourself by what you don't have. You are no longer waiting to be whole. You are whole now, not because you got what you wanted, but because you let it go and discovered what you truly needed was always with you. Your breath, your awareness, your ability to begin again. And that is more than enough. Sometimes life closes in, so you can finally look within. There will come a moment in your life, not once, but many times, when the walls seem to close in around you. The noise becomes unbearable, the path ahead blurs, the world feels too loud, too fast, too demanding, and what once felt certain, your roles, your relationships, your dreams, suddenly begins to dissolve. You no longer know who you are or what you're doing here. You feel as though you're being stripped of everything that gave you identity, control, and security. It feels like life is suffocating you, but it's not. It is redirecting you inward. In the Buddhist path, these moments are not failures. They are not detours. They are not evidence that you've gone astray. They are invitations, sacred summonses, portals to awakening. When the external world no longer provides meaning, when the old dreams stop working, when the distractions no longer satisfy, you are being guided by pain, by silence, by loss, into the only place you were always meant to return, within. And this journey, though it may feel terrifying, is the beginning of peace. It is common to believe that spiritual growth is beautiful, that it feels like freedom from the start, that it's all clarity and stillness and ease. But the truth is, growth often begins in chaos. It begins in darkness. It begins when the things you once leaned on fall away, when the people you counted on disappear, when the image you created of yourself no longer fits the shape of your spirit. Growth begins when you are forced to meet yourself, not the version you show the world, but the self that lives in the quiet after the noise has passed. And that self is not always easy to face. For many of us, the external world has become a distraction, a way to escape the emptiness, the confusion, the unresolved stories we carry deep within. We fill our calendars with tasks. We scroll endlessly. We chase achievements and validation. We stay busy not because we are thriving, but because we are terrified of what we might hear in the silence. But the silence is where the truth lives, and when life closes in, when you can no longer run, you finally meet that silence. It may come through heartbreak, through illness, through job loss, through loneliness, through some unnamed despair that swells in the chest and makes breathing feel like work. Whatever the form, the invitation is the same. Look within, not to judge, not to fix, but to see. To see the pain you've buried under years of pretending. To see the desires you've denied in order to be accepted. To see the fears that have shaped your choices without your permission. To see the beliefs you've carried about yourself, about love, about worthiness, about what's possible, and to ask if they are really true. The journey inward is not comfortable, but it is sacred. Because in that stillness, you begin to remember who you are beneath the layers. You begin to hear your own voice, small but steady. You begin to feel your own breath, not as something automatic, but as a gift. You begin to notice the rising and falling of your thoughts, not as facts, but as passing clouds. And slowly, the grip of fear begins to loosen. In Buddhism, there is a teaching, the way out is in. Meaning, liberation is not found by avoiding the pain, but by entering it with presence. Freedom is not discovered in the future, it is realized here, now, in the center of your being. And so, when life strips you of the roles you've played, when you are no longer the helper, the achiever, the strong one, the funny one, the successful one, the admired one, you may panic. You may feel like everything is falling apart. But perhaps for the first time, you are being asked to meet yourself, not as an idea, not as a performance, but as a presence. And that is the beginning of true transformation. When you meet yourself in the dark, when you sit with your confusion, your anger, your grief, without numbing, without fleeing, you begin to understand that you are not broken. You are becoming. You are not lost. You are being rerouted. You are not weak. You are shedding the weight that was never yours to carry. You begin to see that you don't need more information. You need deeper awareness. That the answers don't live in someone else's book or someone else's voice. They live inside you, buried beneath the noise you've been taught to chase. And as you sit, as you breathe, as you let yourself be, all of yourself, not just the polished parts, you begin to feel something shift. Maybe not all at once, maybe not in fireworks, but in quiet, subtle ways. You begin to feel a peace that isn't dependent on anything outside of you. You begin to feel a stability that isn't built on control. You begin to feel a love that doesn't need to be earned. It simply is. This is the gift of the collapse. This is the wisdom of the constriction. It doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to lead you home. But you must be willing to sit in the discomfort. You must be willing to ask hard questions. You must be willing to listen deeply. to the child within you, to the ache in your body, to the truth you've long ignored. Because the path to awakening is not paved in certainty. It is walked in surrender, surrendering the need to be understood, surrendering the image you worked so hard to maintain, surrendering the idea that healing has a timeline, surrendering the belief that worthiness comes from doing, and in that surrender you will find yourself, not as a concept, but as a living presence, a presence that watches the thoughts rise and fall, a presence that witnesses the emotions swell and recede, a presence that remains steady and quiet in every breath. That presence is your true nature. It is not the storm, it is the sky. It is not the wave, it is the ocean. It is not the pain, it is the awareness in which the pain arises and passes. And it has always been there, waiting for you. So if life feels like it is closing in on you, do not despair. Do not assume something has gone wrong. Do not rush to escape. Sit, breathe, listen, and let the silence show you what the noise could never reveal. You are not your confusion. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the one who sees. And that seeing is freedom. That presence is peace. That awareness is the home you've been seeking in everything else. Sometimes life has to close in, not to trap you, but to guide you inward. Because what you are looking for is not out there. It's already here, inside you. Always. Pain is not the end. It's the portal. There is a silent assumption embedded deep within the human mind that pain is something to be escaped, something to be fixed, buried, fought, or forgotten. It is often treated like a sign that something has gone terribly wrong, a detour from the path we were meant to walk, or a punishment for not being good enough, fast enough, wise enough. And so we run, we numb ourselves with distractions, with stories, with habits, with denial. We try to outrun the storm within us, praying that if we can just stay ahead of it long enough, maybe it will disappear on its own. But in the Buddhist path, this belief is gently but powerfully dismantled. Pain in this wisdom tradition is not the enemy. It is the beginning of insight. It is not the wall that blocks the way. It is the doorway into the depths of truth. In fact, pain, when met with awareness, becomes a portal. A portal into the inner landscapes we've long ignored. A portal into the roots of our attachments, our illusions, our fears. And ultimately, a portal into the freedom that lies beyond identification with the self that suffers. Yet for most of us, our conditioning teaches us to treat pain as something to eliminate, a sickness that needs curing. We seek to get over it, to move on, to bounce back, not realizing that in doing so, we are only reinforcing the very cycle that causes suffering in the first place, resistance. Buddhism teaches us that suffering is not caused by pain itself, but by our resistance to pain. It is the pushing away, the clenching, the refusal to feel that keeps us trapped. Pain is like fire. If you fight it blindly, you burn. But if you learn how to approach it with reverence, with awareness, with presence, that same fire becomes a sacred purifier. It burns away the false, the unnecessary, the egoic noise. It does not destroy who you are. It destroys who you are not. So let us begin again, slowly and softly, with this understanding. Pain is not here to ruin you. It is here to awaken you, and only when you allow it to open, instead of closing you, will you begin to glimpse the vast sky beyond the clouds. There are many kinds of pain. Some pain is sharp and sudden, a loss, a betrayal, a shocking turn in the story you thought you were writing. Other pain is quieter, more persistent. It hums like background noise in your chest. The ache of loneliness, of not feeling seen, of wondering if your life has any real meaning. Some pain comes from outside events, but much of it is born from within. From the expectations we place upon ourselves, the comparisons we drown in, the stories we tell about who we should be. Whatever its form, pain is always speaking, not in the language of words, but in the language of emotion, and every emotional pain, when listened to without judgment, carries a message. Sometimes it says, there is a part of you that has not been met with love. Sometimes it says, you have been wearing a mask for too long. Sometimes it says, the way you're living no longer honors who you truly are. Pain does not lie. It is honest, even when it's inconvenient. It will not let you stay asleep. It will knock until you open the door to yourself. But in order to hear its message, you must stop running. You must sit down, in the fire, in the noise, in the grief, and become still. You must turn toward the place that hurts. Not to fix it, but to feel it. To feel it fully, as it is, without adding the layers of story and blame and shame. Because beneath the initial sting of pain, beneath the narrative of, why is this happening to me, there is a deeper layer. There is tenderness, there is vulnerability, there is truth. There is a part of you that longs not just to be healed, but to be held. And that holding, that sacred presence, is something only you can offer yourself. This is the beginning of compassion, not as a concept, but as a living, breathing practice. To sit with your own sorrow and not turn away. To bow to your fear and say, you are welcome here. To meet your grief and whisper, you don't have to leave for me to be whole. This kind of self-compassion is the turning point, because it marks the moment when pain no longer becomes a prison, but a path inward, a path downward, a path through. In Buddhist teaching, there is a concept known as the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain itself, the inevitable discomfort, loss, or sadness that arises in life. The second arrow is the suffering we create by resisting, judging, or attaching to that pain. The first arrow is out of our control. The second is optional. When we feel pain and immediately say, this shouldn't be happening, or what's wrong with me, or I'll never be okay, we are shooting ourselves with a second arrow. But when we feel pain and say, this is part of being human, or this moment is difficult and I choose to stay present, we disarm the second arrow before it pierces us. We begin to walk the path of awareness. We begin to transform the pain into presence. Presence is not passive, it is the most radical act of love. To remain present with pain is to reclaim your power. To stop outsourcing your peace to external circumstances, to stop waiting for the world to change before you can feel whole. When you sit in stillness with your suffering, something miraculous begins to unfold. You begin to see that you are not the pain. You are the space in which the pain is arising. You are the container, not the contents. You are the sky, not the storm. And in that space, there is choice. You can breathe. You can soften. You can unhook from the thoughts that drag you deeper into despair. You can offer yourself tenderness instead of judgment. You can choose not to abandon yourself. And that choice, repeated again and again, becomes the bridge from suffering to liberation. Pain is not the end. It is the portal into truth, the portal into compassion, the portal into awakening. But the journey through the portal cannot be rushed. You cannot sprint through grief. You cannot force clarity. You cannot bypass the burning. What you can do is remain. Remain with breath. Remain with presence. Remain with kindness. Remain until the pain has offered its teaching, and the storm passes not because you forced it to, but because you honored it. In time, the pain that once felt like a curse becomes your greatest teacher. It humbles the ego. It softens the heart. It reveals what truly matters, and it returns you to yourself. Not the self that needs to be perfect, but the self that is spacious, grounded, wise, and kind. The self that knows how to sit in the fire and not be consumed. The self that knows how to bow to the impermanence of all things. The self that understands everything arises and everything passes, even this. So if you are in pain right now, do not despair. Do not believe the story that says you are broken, lost, or beyond repair. You are in the fire because something old is burning away and something new is waiting to be born. You are not at the end. You are at the threshold of becoming. Walk through it with courage, with gentleness, with eyes wide open, and on the other side you will not find perfection, you will not find certainty, you will not find the absence of pain, you will find presence. And presence, once tasted, is the beginning of true freedom. Let the pain lead you home. Everything you lost was never meant to stay. There is a moment in every human life when the heart breaks, not just from pain, but from realization. A quiet, devastating truth emerges. Some things, no matter how tightly you held them, were never yours to keep. Some people, no matter how much love you poured into them, were never destined to stay. Some dreams, no matter how deeply you believed, were never meant to manifest in the form you imagined. And the grief that follows this realization is unlike any other. It is not just sorrow, it is disorientation. It feels like being ripped from your own story and left alone on a blank page. You wonder if something went wrong. You question if you made a mistake. You retrace your steps again and again, asking where you slipped, what you missed, what you could have done differently. But sometimes life does not take from you as punishment. It takes to purify. It removes not to destroy, but to reshape. And in the Buddhist path, this is not loss. This is liberation in disguise. It is one of the most difficult truths to accept, that what you clung to was not meant to be permanent, that the relationship, the job, the title, the dream, though it once served your growth, was never the destination. It was a bridge, a chapter, a sacred stop along a much longer journey. But we forget. We hold on to what feels familiar, even when it begins to crumble in our hands. We confuse comfort with truth. We believe that if something feels good, it must last forever. And when it doesn't, we assume we've failed. But in Buddhism, impermanence is not failure. It is the nature of all things. Everything that arises will pass. Everything that forms will dissolve. Everything that breathes will one day exhale for the last time. This is not morbid, it is freeing. Because when we understand that nothing belongs to us, not even our own bodies, not even our own identities, we begin to soften the grip. We begin to loosen the chains of attachment. We begin to live with presence rather than possession. You may ask, why does it hurt so much to lose what wasn't meant to stay? And the answer is both tender and difficult, because we poured our love into it. Because it became a mirror of our hopes, our identity, our sense of meaning, because it felt like a piece of us. And so when it leaves, it feels like we are being left behind. But in truth, nothing that is you can ever be taken from you. What leaves was never your essence. It was only a garment you wore for a time. It may have fit once, but life, in its wisdom, knew it was no longer serving the shape of your soul. Loss is not just about absence. It is about space. The space left behind is not empty. It is sacred. It is where something deeper can now emerge. When you lose something, you gain access to the truth you could not reach while you were clinging. The silence left in the wake of loss is not a void. It is a doorway. But you must be willing to walk through it. To grieve, yes, but also to release. To honor what was, while accepting what is, to feel the ache without turning it into a lifelong prison. In the Buddhist view, we practice non-attachment not to become cold or indifferent, but to remain open. Non-attachment does not mean you do not love. It means you love without clinging. You love with your palms open, not your fists clenched. You give your heart fully, and when life asks you to let go, you do not shatter. You bow. Because you understand, nothing is ever truly lost. It only changes form. The love remains, even when the person is gone. The lesson remains, even when the opportunity has passed. The essence of the dream remains, even when the path takes a different turn. And if you stay present, if you stay humble, you will see that what leaves often makes room for what was truly meant for you. But first, you must allow the grieving, not just for the thing itself, but for the story you wrapped around it. The belief that it defined your worth. The illusion that without it your life would be meaningless. Let yourself weep. Let the sorrow move through your body like rain through dry soil. Do not rush to replace the lost thing with something new. Do not panic to fill the space. Let the emptiness be. Let it echo. Let it breathe. For it is in this sacred emptiness that clarity begins to emerge. You begin to see what was real and what was illusion. You begin to distinguish between love and attachment, between joy and distraction. You begin to understand that you are still here, still breathing, still worthy, still whole, even without the thing you thought you needed. In fact, maybe now you are more whole than ever, because the pieces that left were never really yours. They were borrowed, temporary. They served their purpose. And now you are free to grow into the next version of yourself. A version that no longer needs to prove. A version that no longer clings out of fear. A version that trusts life enough to surrender. This is not a process of forgetting. It is a process of remembering. Remembering who you are beyond the roles, beyond the achievements, beyond the relationships, beyond the noise. You are the awareness behind the experience. You are the sky that holds every changing weather. You are the silence beneath every sound. You are the space in which all things arise and pass. And when you know this, not just as an idea, but as a lived experience, loss loses its power to define you. You may still feel it. You may still cry. You may still ache when memories visit in the night, but you no longer collapse. You no longer break. You welcome the grief like an old friend who carries a message. And that message is always this: you are not being punished. You are being invited. Invited to return, to simplify, to wake up, to release the illusions and come home to what cannot be taken. So, the next time life removes something from your hands, do not close your heart. Do not tighten your grip on the next thing that comes. Pause. Breathe, trust, and know this: everything you lost was never meant to stay, and everything that stays, your breath, your presence, your capacity to love, was always yours. This is the wisdom of the Dharma: to love without attachment, to walk with gratitude, to let go with grace, and to meet each moment not as a possession but as a gift. Let the losses cleanse you. Let the endings refine you. Let the absence become your teacher, and let the quiet that follows be the beginning of something more honest, more spacious, more you. Because in the end, nothing was ever truly yours, and yet nothing was ever truly lost. Everything just changed form, and you, aware, awake, and alive, are what remains. The storm isn't here to destroy you, it's here to wash you clean. There is a moment in life when everything you thought was stable begins to tremble. The ground beneath your feet that once felt firm turns to shifting sand. The plans you built like temples begin to fall stone by stone. The relationships you clung to as anchors drift away like boats unmoored, and the sky, once so clear, darkens with clouds of confusion, loss, and fear. It is in this moment, when all you've known begins to dissolve, that you find yourself standing in the heart of the storm, and the first instinct is to resist, to brace, to tighten your body and your mind against the winds of change, to scream in silence, "Why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong?" But the storm does not answer. It doesn't need to, because in the quiet language of the universe, the storm is not here to punish you. It's here to purify you. Buddhist teachings remind us that nothing in life is truly fixed. What we call security is often just illusion dressed in routine. What we cling to for identity, titles, roles, appearances, are as fleeting as clouds. And when life sends a storm, it is not out of cruelty. It is because something deeper is being asked of you. A letting go, a cleansing, a surrender. Most people fear the storm because they do not understand its purpose. They see only the destruction, the broken timelines, the cancelled plans, the unexpected loss. But the storm is not just a force of chaos, it is also a force of clarity. It strips away the false, it breaks open what was sealed, it removes what no longer serves, often with painful precision. When the rain comes, it does not ask for permission. It arrives, and in doing so, it touches every part of your life, not just the surface, but the roots. Not just your circumstances, but your attachments. It washes away what is dead and decaying, and it leaves you bare, raw, uncertain, vulnerable. This nakedness is terrifying, to be without your labels, your plans, your comfort zones. But it is in this vulnerability that true transformation begins. Because beneath the surface-level fears, something ancient stirs. A wisdom that remembers you are not the storm, you are the witness to it. You are not your circumstances, you are the awareness in which they rise and fall. You are not the broken branches, you are the tree learning how to bend. And when you stop fighting the storm, when you stop pleading for it to end before its work is done, you begin to see what it was here to reveal all along. It came to show you who you are without your masks. It came to teach you that surrender is not weakness, it is strength of the highest form. It came to remind you that growth does not always happen in still gardens. Sometimes it happens in wild winds. In Buddhism, there is a deep reverence for impermanence, not as a concept to fear, but as a truth to embrace. Nothing lasts, not your joy, not your sorrow, not your successes, not your failures, not your relationships, not even your breath. Everything is passing, everything is changing, everything is flowing. And storms, though fierce, are part of that flow. They are not obstacles, they are invitations. To release control, to soften your grip, to let go of the person you thought you had to be. You may think, but I was doing everything right. Why did it still fall apart? And the answer is, because life is not a contract, it is a current. It does not reward perfection, it rewards presence. And sometimes presence can only be found after everything else is stripped away. The storm humbles you. It takes away your illusions of control. It reveals where you were clinging to what was never yours. It dissolves your expectations, your rigid ideas, your entitlement to ease. And in that dissolution, a deeper part of you is born, a part that knows how to stand in the rain without begging for the sun, a part that can feel pain without drowning in it, a part that does not need answers to rest in awareness. You begin to learn how to suffer consciously, not as a victim, but as a student. You let the storm teach you about impermanence, about resilience, about surrender, and most of all, about the peace that lives underneath it all. Because no matter how fierce the winds, no matter how loud the thunder, there is a still point within you that remains untouched. It is the place where awareness sits. It is the sky behind the storm. It is the watcher, the observer, the silent center. And when you rest in that place, you realize something profound. The storm is not against you, it is for you. It is dismantling the false so the true can emerge. It is erasing the noise so you can hear your own heart again. It is breaking open the shell so your spirit can stretch into its next form. But none of this happens if you resist. If you run, if you numb, if you fight. You must meet the storm fully, with open eyes, with grounded breath, with a heart willing to feel. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. In Buddhist meditation, we are taught to sit with whatever arises, not to push it away, not to fix it, but to observe, to allow, to breathe with it. This is the practice of mindfulness. It is not a tool to escape the storm. It is the path through it. You sit in the rain of your sorrow. You breathe into the wind of your fear. You let the thunder of your grief echo through your chest. And you remain. This remaining is your liberation. Because as long as you resist the storm, you remain its prisoner. But when you stop resisting, you become its student, and a student learns. You learn that what you feared was not the storm itself, but your ideas about it. You feared falling apart, but in the falling you found space. You feared losing everything, but in the loss you found yourself. You feared being alone, but in the silence you heard the voice of your own soul. And slowly, something shifts. The storm begins to pass. Not because you forced it to, but because you allowed it to do its work. And in its wake, the air is clearer, the sky is wider, the ground is softer. And you are different. Not broken, not defeated, but reborn, wiser, more spacious, more present. You carry the scent of rain and the strength of roots that survived the flood. You no longer cling to what is passing. You no longer panic at the sound of thunder. You know storms will come, but now you meet them as old friends. You bow to their power. You trust their purpose. You let them wash you clean. Because now you understand. The storm was never here to destroy you. It was here to strip away what wasn't truly you. It was here to clear the path, to open your heart, to deepen your presence, to bring you home. And this coming home is the true gift, a home not made of walls or people or plans, but of stillness, of breath, of peace. That cannot be taken, that cannot be lost. That remains, no matter how hard it rains. The people who left were part of the lesson, not the destination. There comes a time in life when silence becomes your most frequent companion. Not because you have no one to talk to, but because the ones you thought would walk with you forever are suddenly gone. Some left quietly, fading like breath on glass. Others left loudly, slamming doors that echoed through the corridors of your memory. And some, perhaps the most painful of all, didn't leave physically, but emotionally, spiritually. They disappeared long before you ever noticed. And when the dust finally settled, you were left wondering what went wrong, why they walked away, and what their absence now means in the shape of your life. But Buddhism teaches that life is not about permanence. It is about presence. It is not about holding on. It is about understanding. It is not about surrounding yourself with people. It is about awakening through every encounter, even the ones that end in heartbreak. The people who walked into your life were never random. Each one was a mirror, a message, a moment that the universe sent to shape you. Some were blessings dressed in skin and smiles. Others were tests wrapped in charm and contradiction. And some were both, gifts and challenges, teachers and destroyers, whose only role was to awaken something in you that could not be reached through solitude alone. But we are not taught this. We are taught to cling, to attach, to measure the value of life by who stays, who texts back, who chooses us over and over again. And so when people leave, it feels like failure. When relationships break, it feels like death. When familiar faces become distant, it feels like rejection. But Buddhism reminds us that nothing that is bound to end can truly belong to you, and no one whose path was meant only for a season can be your lifelong source of peace. People are rivers. They flow in, they flow out. They quench your thirst and then return to the sea. And if you try to dam the river to hold it still out of fear, you will only find stagnation, decay, and sorrow. Your task is not to control the flow of who stays and who leaves. Your task is to remain awake in the current, to learn what each person came to teach, to love deeply but release gently, to let the chapter end when its final word has been written, no matter how much you wish to keep reading. When someone leaves your life, they do not take your worth with them. They do not carry your story in their hands. They simply completed their role. And just as an actor exits the stage when their scene is done, so too must some souls leave when their purpose in your growth has been fulfilled. But we grieve not only the person, we grieve the idea of them. We grieve the future we imagined with them, the comfort they represented, the identity we built around their presence. We grieve not just the loss of love, but the loss of who we were when we were loved by them. And so it takes time to unravel the web of memories, time to sit with the echoes that still call your name, time to forgive what was said, what was unsaid, what was left tangled in the space between two hearts drifting apart. But as time passes, something sacred happens. You begin to see more clearly. You begin to understand that not all pain is punishment. Some of it is purification. You begin to realize that the wound they left is also the place where light now enters. The emptiness becomes fertile. The silence becomes sacred. And the questions that once tormented you, why did they leave? What did I do wrong? Transform into deeper reflections. What did I learn? What truth did they reveal? How did their leaving free me? For every departure holds within it a hidden lesson. Some people come to teach you love. Others come to teach you boundaries. Some arrive to reflect your beauty. Others arrive to reflect your wounds. And a few, the rarest of all, come to help you meet yourself through joy, through sorrow, through endings you never expected but needed all along. You may carry the scar of their absence forever, but scars are not weaknesses. They are signs that healing has taken place. They are reminders that you felt deeply, lived honestly, and survived the unraveling of what no longer served your path. Do not wish away the memory. Do not force yourself to forget. Instead, transform the memory into wisdom. Let it soften your heart without breaking your spirit. Let it guide you toward more conscious connections. Let it remind you of your strength, your capacity to endure, your ability to love again, even after being left. In Buddhist practice, we are encouraged to sit with impermanence, to meditate not on what lasts, but on what flows, to accept that the present moment is already vanishing, and to love anyway, to hold gently what will one day leave, to pour your heart into relationships without clinging to them for salvation, because no person is your savior, no love is your final destination. They are all stepping stones on the path to yourself, to your own awareness, to your own peace, to the part of you that cannot be left because it is always here, watching, witnessing, waiting for you to return. So today, let yourself release the ones who are no longer here, not with bitterness, not with blame, but with a silent bow of gratitude. They came, they loved, they hurt, they healed, and they left. And because they left, you had to grow. Because they left, you had to stand alone. Because they left, you had to discover the temple within your own soul. They were not your ending. They were a sacred interlude, a necessary wind that shaped the mountains of your becoming. Let them go in peace. Let them walk their path. And you, walk yours, with fewer illusions, with deeper eyes, with a heart that no longer begs for permanence, but dances with presence. Because now you know, the people who left were part of the lesson, not the destination. And the destination was never them. It was always you. Your deepest wounds are gateways to the wisdom you were meant to carry. There is a sacred truth that few people are ready to hear when they are hurting. The pain you wish to avoid most, the sorrow you try to numb, the wound you bury beneath a smile. These are not punishments. They are invitations. Invitations to return, to remember, and to awaken to a level of inner truth you cannot access through pleasure, comfort, or praise alone. They are not the things that break you. They are the very things that shape you. In the world of Buddhist wisdom, suffering is not an enemy. It is not an obstacle to be removed or a mistake to be corrected. It is a teacher, silent, persistent, and often disguised as chaos. The Buddha himself found his enlightenment only after encountering illness, aging, and death, after seeing the inescapable reality of suffering etched into every face and hidden behind every illusion of worldly happiness. And from that truth, the entire path of awakening was born. So what does this mean for you, the one carrying a wound so deep you fear speaking its name? It means you are not broken, you are being opened. It means you are not cursed, you are being called. And the call is not toward the world, but toward yourself. Your wound is not a flaw in your design. It is a keyhole into the depths of your spirit. It is the very place through which light can enter, and more importantly, through which your truest light can emerge. But to reach that light, you must stop running from your pain. You must stop labeling it as the enemy. You must turn and face it. Not with aggression, but with awareness. Not with resistance, but with curiosity. This is the essence of mindfulness, to sit with what is, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, to breathe into the ache without trying to solve it, to observe the grief without trying to silence it, to listen to the anger without letting it poison your actions. Because inside every wound is a story, and inside every story is a truth you have not yet made peace with. Maybe it's the truth that you were never seen the way you needed. Maybe it's the truth that you were betrayed by someone who said they loved you. Maybe it's the truth that life didn't turn out the way you planned, and that reality feels too heavy to bear. But if you go deep enough into your pain, past the noise of your mind, past the stories of blame, past the questions of why me, you will find something still, something ancient, something so vast it can hold the entirety of your suffering without breaking. That something is your awareness. That something is the part of you that was never wounded, never abandoned, never ashamed. In Buddhism, this part is called your Buddha nature. It is the seed of awakening that lives in every being, no matter how lost they feel. It is the sky that holds every storm, the silence beneath every scream, the peace that exists even when your world has shattered. And it is through your wounds, not despite them, that you can access this sacred space. Why? Because pain humbles you, it strips away the ego, it burns through illusion, it shows you what actually matters, it invites you to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop seeking your worth in things that were never meant to last. It returns you to yourself, not the self you created to impress others, but the self that existed before the world told you who you had to be. Your wounds are not meant to define you. They are meant to refine you. They are portals, not prisons. But most people never walk through them. They build their lives around avoiding the very feelings that would set them free. They chase distractions. They numb with noise. They wear masks so convincingly they forget they were ever in pain to begin with. But you who are still aching, you have a chance they no longer see. You have the rawness that leads to realness. You have the discomfort that leads to depth. You have the scar that points to the sacred. So how do you begin to walk through your wounds? First, you stop judging yourself for having them. You are not weak because you hurt. You are not less spiritual because you struggle. The lotus flower, sacred in Buddhism, grows only in muddy water. It is not in clear ponds that its beauty unfolds. It is in the darkness, in the depths, where the roots tangle with decay, that the blossom begins. Your pain is not proof of your unworthiness. It is evidence that you are alive, that you are growing, that you are reaching toward the light, even when surrounded by shadows. Second, you bring awareness to the wound. Not to wallow in it, not to dramatize it, but to understand it. Where is the pain in your body? What does it feel like? What memory does it hold? What belief does it carry? In Buddhist meditation, we do not escape. We explore. We turn our attention inward, not to fix, but to feel. We sit with the tightness in the chest, the heat in the face, the hollowness in the stomach. We breathe into those places. We soften. We listen. We say to our pain, I see you. I will not abandon you. And something begins to shift. The pain, once suffocating, begins to reveal its roots. Maybe your anger is grief with armor. Maybe your sadness is love that had nowhere to go. Maybe your anxiety is a voice inside that was never heard. And in seeing this, you begin to reclaim your power. Not by denying the wound, but by accepting it fully. You learn to speak from your scar, not your open wound. You learn to let your story be a lantern, not a cage. You learn that your deepest suffering is not your identity, it is your initiation into compassion, into presence, into wisdom. Because once you've suffered deeply, you can no longer look at another's pain and remain unmoved. You see it in their eyes, you feel it in their silence. And instead of judging, you offer space. Instead of fixing, you offer presence. You become the person you once needed, and this is how your wound becomes your wisdom. It no longer screams for attention. It no longer controls your behavior. It no longer defines your worth. It becomes a quiet strength, a knowing smile, a gentle touch. It becomes the way you hold others. It becomes the way you hold yourself. And you begin to live not in fear of pain, but in reverence of what it taught you. You realize that the very thing you thought would destroy you became the foundation of your awakening. The abandonment taught you how to come home to yourself. The betrayal taught you how to trust your own voice. The heartbreak taught you how to love without losing your center. The failure taught you that success is not always measured by applause, but by alignment. And the grief, oh the grief, it carved out the capacity for a love so deep, so pure, so expansive, that it now touches everything you do. This is the alchemy of the soul. This is the gift hidden inside the wound. Not a return to who you were, but a birth into who you were always meant to become. So if you are hurting right now, if you are still bleeding from a past that refuses to let go, do not rush your healing. Sit with it, listen to it, honor it. Let your wound speak, not to shame you, but to guide you. Let it point you to the places you've neglected. Let it show you the parts of yourself that still need your love. Because healing is not about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming your relationship with it. It's about finding the wisdom within the wreckage. It's about standing in the fire without being consumed. And emerging, burnt, yes, but also purified, clearer, stronger, softer. So carry your wounds not as burdens, but as teachers. Let them shape your path. Let them deepen your compassion. Let them open your heart. Because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs people who have walked through the dark and found the light within. And that light, it lives in you. It was born in your pain. And now it is ready to shine. The moment you let go is the moment you begin to heal. There is a moment on every spiritual path where the soul, weary and heavy with the weight of clinging, comes to a crossroads. One path is familiar. It loops in circles, built from habit, emotion, and memory. It is the path of holding on, of refusing to surrender. The other path is unfamiliar. It begins with emptiness, with stillness, with letting go. And although that road feels like loss at first, it is actually the beginning of everything you've truly been seeking. In the teachings of the Buddha, the root of suffering is not pain itself. It is attachment. Attachment to people, attachment to outcomes, attachment to the idea that things must be a certain way in order for us to feel okay. But the world does not bend to our preferences. It unfolds on its own terms. Seasons change, people change, bodies change. And the more we try to grip the passing moments with our closed fists, the more suffering we create for ourselves. Letting go, then, is not giving up. It is waking up. Waking up to the truth that clinging does not keep anything from leaving. It only keeps you from living. Waking up to the reality that peace does not come from control. It comes from trust. And trust does not mean everything will turn out the way you want. Trust means knowing that no matter what happens, you will meet it with presence, with compassion, and with courage. But letting go is hard, not because it is unnatural, but because we were never taught how. From childhood, we are taught to accumulate more toys, more friends, more praise. We are rewarded for holding on, for chasing, for striving. No one teaches us the sacred art of release. No one teaches us that sometimes the most powerful step forward is not adding more, but letting something fall away. And so we become collectors of emotional clutter. We carry grudges like heirlooms. We carry old dreams that no longer fit who we are becoming. We carry expectations that were never ours to hold. We carry guilt over things we did when we didn't know any better. We carry the need to be understood by those who refuse to see us. We carry the ache of love that is no longer returned. And as the years pass, our souls become heavy, not because life is too much, but because we've refused to lay anything down. But healing begins the moment we do. The moment we unclench our jaw, the moment we exhale the apology that was never spoken, the moment we stop chasing closure from people who cannot offer it, the moment we stop waiting for the past to change, the moment we say, "This pain no longer defines me, this memory no longer rules me, this weight is not mine to carry anymore." In Buddhist meditation, letting go is not a single act, it is a continuous practice. Each breath is a letting go. Each moment of silence is a return to the now. Each time we notice a thought and gently release it without judgment, we are practicing freedom. Because the mind will cling. That is its habit. It will revisit what hurt. It will rewrite conversations. It will replay regrets. But the mind is not the master. It is a servant. And through mindfulness, you teach it to rest. You teach it that it is safe to stop running. You teach it that it is safe to be still. And in that stillness, you begin to see clearly that what you've been grasping so tightly may be the very thing keeping you from peace. Sometimes we hold on because we're afraid of the emptiness. Who will I be without this person? What will I feel if I stop numbing? Where will I go if I let this dream die? But emptiness is not the enemy. It is the space where healing grows. It is the silence in which truth is heard. It is the pause before transformation. Letting go is not about forgetting. It is not about pretending something didn't matter. It is about honoring what was and releasing the need to carry it into what will be. It is the sacred acknowledgement that something shaped you, and now it is time to shape yourself. You may have to let go of a person you still love. Not because they are evil, not because you hate them, but because they are no longer aligned with your peace, your growth, your path. You may have to let go of a dream you held for years, not because you failed, but because you outgrew it, and clinging to it is now holding you back from discovering your deeper purpose. You may have to let go of the desire to be understood, to prove your worth, to convince someone of your value. Because true healing doesn't come when others finally see you. It comes when you finally see yourself. In Buddhist teachings, everything that arises also passes away. The seasons pass, the rain stops, the heart breaks, then mends. And the more you practice letting go, the more you realize that nothing needs to be forced. You do not need to chase what is meant for you. You do not need to beg for what is real. You simply need to clear the space, internally and externally, for healing to unfold naturally. That means saying goodbye with grace. That means deleting the old message you keep rereading. That means setting down the mask of who you think you're supposed to be. That means crying without shame. That means forgiving yourself, not because you've earned it, but because carrying guilt is not love, it is punishment. That means choosing peace over pride, presence over performance, healing over holding on. And the moment you do, even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, you will feel something shift. Not dramatically, not loudly, but deeply. You will feel space open in your chest. You will feel your breath return to its natural rhythm. You will feel the heavy fog in your mind begin to lift. And that space, that breath, that clarity, that is healing. Not a dramatic fix, not the sudden absence of pain, but a subtle, sacred unfolding. A return to your center, a remembrance of who you are without the weight. And from that place, you begin to rebuild, not from desperation, but from alignment. Not to prove anything, but to honor your truth. Not to fill a void, but to express the wholeness you are discovering within. Letting go does not mean you stop loving. It means you start loving differently. Wider, deeper, freer. You love without grasping. You give without expecting. You hold space without trying to control. And you realize that what is meant for you is not what clings. It's what flows with you, grows with you, and supports your becoming. So today, take inventory. What are you still holding that no longer nourishes you? What are you carrying that is not yours to carry? What are you gripping so tightly that your own hands are bleeding? And can you, just for a moment, set it down? You don't have to know what comes next. You don't have to have it all figured out. You simply have to create space, because in that space, healing begins. In that space, your breath deepens. In that space, your soul speaks. And what it whispers is this: you are already enough. You don't need to carry the past to prove your worth. The moment you let go is the moment you begin to heal. It is the sacred threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. It is not an act of weakness, it is an act of immense inner courage. Because to release what once defined you, what once comforted you, what once felt like everything, you must first believe that what lies ahead is more aligned with your true nature than what is slipping away. Buddhism does not ask you to destroy the past. It does not ask you to erase your memories, your relationships, or your mistakes. It only asks you to see them clearly, to hold them with mindfulness, and to bow to them gently before you set them down. Because clinging is not love, and attachment is not security. True love flows, true peace breathes, true healing unfolds when the soul is free to rest in the now, unburdened by what should have been or what must be. And when you begin to walk this path, not in theory but in lived experience, you realize that you were never truly empty. You were just crowded. Crowded by expectation, crowded by identity, crowded by fear and resistance and the desperate need for certainty. But the soul does not grow in certainty, it grows in space. It expands in silence. It blossoms not in grasping, but in trust. Trust in the moment, trust in the letting go, trust in the self that remains when everything else has been released. So if you find yourself standing at that threshold right now, between the pain of holding on and the fear of letting go, breathe. You are not alone. Every awakened heart has stood where you stand. And every one of them chose, again and again, to release what no longer served their becoming. And in doing so, they discovered the quiet truth that was always there, waiting beneath the noise, that you are already whole, already worthy, already home, within yourself. Let go, not to lose, but to remember who you were before the world told you to hold so tightly. Let go, not to move on, but to move deeper. Let go, because the moment you do not fall, you rise. And in rising, you begin to heal, not just your wounds, but your very way of being in the world, one breath at a time, one release at a time, one sacred moment of courage at a time. Letting go is the path. Healing is the gift. And peace? Peace is the quiet light that greets you when you arrive. Welcome home.